have some feedback from the last time, so I figured I'd go over that first, not in really any particular order. I want to just say these people's first names, not their last names, because I don't think that's quite appropriate. So at the beginning of January, I got some feedback from someone named Christopher, and he says, just last week I stumbled upon your podcast on the Astrocade, and I've listened to episodes 0 through 2. You and Chris do a good job, and I find it more useful than many of the classic gaming podcasts. Though I own about a dozen or so consoles, I've never played the Astrocade. So, you have given me quite a bit of information on the machine and the community. Most recently, I purchased an Emerson Arcadia. I found it interesting that you both live in Albuquerque. I moved to New Mexico about 4 years ago, and I'm about an hour away from the Duke City. Could you tell me about any groups or events from classic gamers in the area? So one of the reasons I'm reading this one first, Paul already knows this because we spoke a few days ago. We did a segment on the Arcadia, or not the Arcadia. I got Arcadia on the brain now. Yeah. On the Arcadian and letters.
Yeah, we're going to start a new podcast here.
I'm calling you back at 10 o'clock tonight, guys, for the Arcadia podcast. So I talked to this guy, Christopher, through several emails, and we ended up meeting up twice now. And we've gotten together, played the Astrocade, which he'd never played before. And we also played the Arcadia. And he's going to be coming over again this week on Tuesday, actually. We're going to be playing the Atari Jaguar, so that's kind of cool. Also, just a couple of weeks ago, I uploaded a video of Artillery Duel, because Chris and I played it, and I recently got Adobe Premiere Elements, and I posted it to the Yahoo group. I don't know if you guys got a chance to watch it, but Lee listened to it or watched it, and he gave some feedback, and I wanted to read that here. Artillery Duel was the first game I played on the Astrocade. Nice memories. Funny how Human Cannonball, Smithereens, Worms, Angry Birds evolved from this concept. Given that, the basic artillery game is still my favorite. It seems like more science physics is involved, either real or perceived. I thought it was a really nice simulation back in the day. Still do. I played the cart version of this and was in awe of the ground being drawn in. I thought it was a cool effect. I'd reset the game just to watch it draw. For an 11-year-old, this was cool stuff. Cutting edge. Thanks for sharing. Well, thanks for giving feedback, man.
Yeah, they got a whole little cinema scene with like soldiers marching at the start of the cart version, don't they?
Yeah, they do. It's pretty cool looking, actually. It's kind of it's annoying because you have to watch it every time and listen to it.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever typed in the basic version?
Oh, yeah. That video, actually, Chris and I, we played both versions.
Okay.
And then we played the other one. Yeah. I did not type it in, however.
Yeah. You can get it on Bally Basic or Astro Basic or Blue Ram Basic.
Do you guys remember, I think it was in one of the catalogs, and I'm pretty sure there was this discussion back and forth on the user group. Wasn't in one of the catalogs, before they released it on cartridge, wasn't it going to be G.I. Joe?
Supposedly.
Artillery Duel or something like that, if I remember?
Yeah, it's supposed to be G.I. Joe. I haven't seen it in the catalog, but there's a prototype that's labeled G.I. Joe, and there's a picture of it on Bally Alley, and there's, I guess it's a proto of Artillery Duel. Now, whether that was ever going to actually have that name or they were just calling that in-house, I don't know, because I don't remember actually seeing it in the catalog, but it doesn't mean it didn't happen. Did you ever hear that, Paul?
Yeah, I remember seeing the picture. I don't remember off the top of my head if they ever had a catalog with that.
This was posted in the Atari Age forums. It's from William Culver. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with his, he's got a few podcasts out there, a ColecoVision's podcast and a Channel F podcast, and I think a couple others, but those are the two I've listened to. And I'm going to read here what he has to say. We actually exchanged some information after this, but I'm not going to read that follow-up, maybe in the next episode or something like that. He says, really digging the podcast, Adam. I am getting caught up on the episodes and have really enjoyed them. I have a pretty good history with the system. My dad was really into it. We had the normal one, a brown one, and later my dad bought himself the white one just for him to use. I pretty much took over the other Astrocade. I wrote several programs on it, including one that I used to monitor my model railroad. Then I later retired the Bally from my Atari 800. I also am in the Astrocade FAQ where I describe how to repair the Astrocade. And I looked it up because I knew he was in it, but I couldn't recall what he'd written. And what he basically says is he describes how to replace the caps. He goes on to say, my dad worked in electronics and used to repair Astrocades. The store you talk about in Evansville, Indiana, ABC Hobbycraft. My dad and I used to go there monthly. Most of the games I had came from that store. I remember purchasing Galactic Invasion and The Incredible Wizard from this place. I used to take the Astrocade to bi-monthly meetings to host 4-player Panzer Attack tournaments and such. I used to love getting the Arcadian and the cursor in the mail. I looked forward to the challenge to get the type bin programs to work on my own. Most times I figured it out. I've done a few vids of my favorite games on the systems, and some games I liked back from when Wave Makers and such. Chris asked me to send in an audio sub, so I plan on doing that this weekend, which was last weekend, but he hasn't had the chance. So what he and I might do possibly is do a user interview. So like I might give him a call and we'll talk about some of the interesting stuff he did back then. Because it's interesting, because like when he talks about going to the meeting, it was actually he went to an Astrocade user group, which is pretty cool.
Oh, where was that at?
I guess in Indiana, I guess, because if he was visiting ABC Hobbycraft. So, and he also went on to say that his dad actually started repairing Bally's for Astrovision. So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I'd like to hear more.
Yeah, he has some links to some videos that he has. He did some reviews of basic games and some about 10 cartridge games as well. This is just from a couple days ago, and this is actually in the Atari Age forums, and a user named Ubsaurus posted this, and I asked him if I can read it on the podcast because I couldn't answer his question, and I thought it might be useful for anyone out there to help be able to answer it. And he says, I'm thinking of ordering a new capacitor kit for my Astrocade, among other consoles, even though it's not having any problems. I've heard about how a cap failure can pretty much blow the whole system up, so it's got me a bit paranoid that it'll fail. I've already removed the RF shielding and slapped on some heat sinks to the 3 main chips, which have all worked out pretty well. So I guess I'm just curious what other people's thoughts are on preemptively swapping the capacitors out. Any other components I should consider replacing at the time? So I don't really have an answer for him. Do either of you guys know much about that or have any suggestions? Or can we just leave it to maybe a listener to get back with us on this?
I don't know if, unfortunately, I don't know enough about electronics to know what would happen if the capacitors fail, if it could kill the whole system or not. Honestly, I don't know. I mean, as far as, replacing the replacing the existing capacitors with one of the cap kits, I've heard yes to do that, and then I've also heard people say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
But I'm going to leave it up to listeners. If there's anyone out there who has something to say about this, look forward to hearing it. So
yeah, maybe Ken would know, since he's done repairs on those before.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, I'll ask him about that specifically. Next up, I have something I wanted to read about. This was something I also posted to the Yahoo group, but I was hoping that maybe someone could come up with an answer for me. There's a game that's based on the Astrocade chipset that's an arcade game, and it's actually unreleased. It's called Demons and Dragons, and it plays in MAME. And you can play it, but it's got a really strange setup. And that setup is it uses like the fire button is a trackball, and the movement is an analog joystick, which, I tried to set it up, couldn't get it quite to work correctly under MAME, but that's not the big deal about it. What I think is interesting about this game is that even though it uses the Astrocade chipset, it appears to have more colors on screen than the Astrocade can actually take care of. And I was wondering if, and I had asked if anyone knew anything about that. And no one really gave me an answer to that part of it, although Brett Bilbray did reply, and he said that at Dave Nutting Associates, that game was set up in the lab on test, and while it was sitting there in a track mode, it would say over and over, "Trouble and doom await thee now," like every 20 seconds. It was a form of torture, he says. So if anyone actually knows anything about the hardware setup in that game, Demons and Dragons, and if it actually could display more colors than the regular Astrocade, because it sure is on the screen. I don't know if they're doing it through some manipulation of interrupts or something. I don't know, but it doesn't seem like it. So.
Hey, how you doing? This isn't really meant to entertain anyone. Couldn't care less. It's just perfect for the first annual episode of A Very Astrocast Christmas. Just a bit of a tribute to my buddy Adam. This story exemplifies the kind of guy Adam is, but it's by no means isolated in that respect. In the early and mid-90s, I wrote articles about old video games for my own amusement. The games had just started to be called classic. I had just kept playing them all the way through, and always finding new favorites, of course. New, old favorites, you might say. So, I thought, oh, they're classic now, huh? All right. I saved these articles and essays that I wrote on Commodore 64 disks as sequential files. I had written a basic program to read and write these simple text files. The characters were saved to disk, keystroke by keystroke as I typed, so it was pretty funny to read them back off the disk because you'd even see my deletes and stuff in real time. This was for my own enjoyment. I like to write. I didn't know that anyone else was writing about Atari 2600 games, C64 games, and old arcade games. I figured it was probably weird. But I didn't care. It was fun for me. I'd also write stuff about the Beatles, Frank Zappa, and on and on. I wrote solo music and recorded it on a 4-track cassette machine, and I used to save the lyrics that way in my sequential files, as well as other stuff from the band I was in. I didn't mean to talk about this, but that reminds me of my dad's purchase of a VHS camcorder in the 80s, which I immediately appropriated. I'd sometimes film myself playing an Atari VCS game and, make up funny stuff that the characters were saying to each other. I love abstract pixel graphics, but I would affectionately make fun of some of the cruder graphics in the games, So I'm firing my laser cannon, or it could be an electric pencil sharpener, stuff like that. If only I'd known that some cats would make a fortune doing the same thing on YouTube 20-odd years later. Anyway, I had no idea about newsletters that focused on old games, zines as they were called, or Usenet, or the budding websites about this stuff, usually on GeoCities, if you remember that. The internet had stopped with CompuServe for me. I even wrote a C64 program that would open the modem port for character-by-character viewing by someone else who had a C64 in his own distant house. So I accidentally invented chat, because the difference is that, unlike certain companies, I had the sense not to spread the idea. Anyway, I had known Adam during our freshman year in high school. This is going back to 1986, and I changed high schools. So from 87 onward, I didn't see the guy until the spring of 97. I was shopping for old cartridges at a thrift shop, and I ran into him. He was employed there, and we were surprised to find that we had both written about old games. I was especially impressed with a newsletter, on actual paper, kids, that he wrote and sent out called Orphaned Computers and Game Systems. He had started it in 94. So we started hanging out again, of course, in the apartment that he shared with his first wife and his toddler son, who's now in his early 20s, nearly done with college and writing opening music for podcasts. Adam had a massive collection of old consoles and computers. We played a whole bunch of stuff that we hadn't been able to get our hands on as kids. And as he was busy tiling floors and taking care of a family, it had been quite a while since the most recent issue of his newsletter. So I encouraged him to start it back up. He said he would if I'd collaborate, so he set me up with an Amiga, and we used PageStream to format the thing. We eventually had hundreds of subscribers around the world, which is a fancy way of saying that one of the addresses on our list was overseas. We started writing together for his newsletter, which is now a website at orphanedgames.com, and we wrote for Video Magic, and that was a half newsletter, half used game catalog. Good Deal Games, all sorts of stuff. I'm getting ahead of my Christmas 97 story, but we went to the World of Atari 98 convention in Vegas, and I heard some of the game makers speak for the first time. I hadn't even known of the existence of this scene, if you like, or community. That awful word culture is so overused. I really try to avoid it. Everything's a culture. People are so imitative, I guess it's better than being a thing. Stop trying to sound dumb. You're not giving the illusion of youth, and it's not cool. You're smarter than that. Smart? Oh, is that a thing now? Not hard. Not hard. Just hard enough to shut up this hypothetical guy. It's almost as bad as spiritual successor. Hard. Anyway, there's a reason I'm talking about all this stuff. Adam wasn't crazy about the fact that all I had were the 2600, the C64, and the Amiga he had put together for me. He figured that if I was going to be writing for the newsletter, I needed experience with the old console games that was much more involved than just hanging out in his apartment trying out games. So at the end of 97, he responded to my Christmas cynicism in his characteristic way, with a combination of generosity and smartassness. I got home very early one morning, a couple of days before Christmas, after my graveyard manager shift at a restaurant, and there was a bunch of wrapped presents stacked just in front of my inner front door. So I brought all the presents in, wondering what the hell was going on. And there was a letter on top explaining all of this. He had essentially given me his doubles, and he had a lot. As I unwrapped each gift, my eyes got larger. I must have looked like the Italian version of one of those goofy Japanese cartoon kids. Here's what Adam gave me for Christmas: a ColecoVision, an Atari 5200 in the giant case with 2 controllers that he had sent off to be repaired, an Atari 7800, an Atari 65XE, and a Nintendo, the first one, which I had played a few years before at my bass player's house. Adam also gave me all 5 or 6 NES games that he remembered my saying I liked. It was very thoughtful. There was also a box full of books and manuals and, of course, a bunch of software for all of this stuff. The implication was, "So you grump, do you still hate Christmas?" I couldn't believe his generosity. So, of course, I didn't leave the house for a year. We found that one of the keys didn't work on the 65XE, so he took it back and gave me one of his 130XEs instead. Mind you, there were 2 Atari disk drives and a giant stack of discs among the presents, you know. Slightly later, he decided I still didn't have enough of his doubles for our newsletter research, so he gave me a TurboGrafx 16 and an Astrocade. And the latter I kept for several years, as Adam and I moved separately all over the country for various reasons. But when we both happened to wind up back in Albuquerque, shortly after he started up Bally Alley, the only Astrocade I think he had at the time had overheated itself to death, so I insisted that he take back the one he had given me. But it was like pulling teeth to get him to take it back. Maybe I used a trick, like saying, "Well, all right, Adam, I'll just leave it plugged in on the thick shag carpet in front of my television, covered with an electric blanket so it stays warm while I'm playing the Incredible Wizard." That would have done it. Give that back to me. All I could do in return, all I could think of around each Christmas or Adam birthday, was to write games that he might like. The funniest are Stella Gets a Lobotomy and Super Space Carnage. I think he also dug Jupiter's Electrician. They're C64 games. They're out there. Adam even managed to get them included in GameBase. I wrote him a text adventure on the Atari computer he had given me, and then improved it using Inform 6, called Fork, the Great Underground Dining Room. I kept telling him I didn't think this stuff was enough to reciprocate all that he had given me, but his attitude was, "Don't worry about it. What's the matter with you?" He's a generous dude, man. He doesn't even like me to dwell on it like this, but tough. It's my Christmas submission. And I have a couple backup PCs because of him. Thankfully for me, he and his son upgrade their PCs every few years. The podcast you're listening to came about as a natural extension of Adam's writing for the newsletter and, of course, all the writing and massive research he's done, along with a couple of out-of-state friends, for that amazing resource, cutepuppies.com. I mean, the Bally Alley website, of course. Adam's a great friend, and would be, of course, even without all of that stuff. It's just stuff, as he's quick to point out. It's almost over, Adam, so stop turning red, just grin and bear it. And the fact is, he's one of those rare people. He's friends with me, not a version of me who's different in one way or another, according to his preferences. Younger listeners, look, remember, if people want you in their lives, they get you, not a sort of you who's more like them. If you gotta change, no deal, all right? Anything you do purely for the approval or acceptance of other people is destructive to yourself. Adam doesn't get on me about my choices like so many others have done. He doesn't bug me about not having a cell phone, not wanting a car. There are reasons, but they're not for this recording. He doesn't try to get me to give up cigarettes. He's a real friend to me. He doesn't say, you really ought to be a drinker. And, of course, if you want a great buddy like that, be one. I don't try to change him either, except I admit I'm hoping that this will be the year he gives up heroin and stops trying to sneak all of those hookers past his wife. You cats are doing an amazing job. The show gets better and better. Take it easy, and Merry Christmas.
Well, thank you, Chris. I appreciate that.
That Adam sounds like a really great guy. Hope I meet him someday.
Yeah, tell me about it. I have to make sure to pay him off. I promised to give him another couple of systems now. I guess I have to follow through on that.
Nice.
Yeah, that was something else I'd given him that year was because our newsletter was called Orphan Computers and Game System. I actually I wrote a special edition of it just for him that was just about everything I gave him and gave some of the history of some of the stuff. So that was kind of fun. But I'm glad he liked it, and he still uses some of that stuff, and we still play video games together, so that's cool. And in fact, I think the Astrocade that I'd given him that he gave back to me is, I think, the one I still use right now, because mine had overheated, if you can believe it. And yeah,
what?
So that's what I've got. What?
What?
Blast Droids by
Yes.
Esoterica. It was released in 1983.
Another two-player game.
It's not improved by playing it with two people, unfortunately.
No, it is. What do you mean?
I thought it was a little better with two people myself.
Well, maybe we can describe, because this is something I think we haven't really done in the past, is describe the manual, the cartridge, and the box. So I wrote down a couple notes on that. If you don't mind, I'll mention what those are. So the manual is 5 pages long. It has a dark blue text on what appears to be, in a scan I have, a beige paper, but I don't know. No, it doesn't matter too much. The manual is set up as a home study course for someone who's just become a pilot or wants to become a pilot. It gives 4 lessons on how to move your ship, then asks a fill-in-the-blank question that the reader must answer correctly before moving on. So it'll say, Section 1, how do you thrust forward? And it says, you can't continue until you answer this question correctly. It's pretty silly, but it's something a little bit different. Did you guys get a chance to check out the manual?
Yeah, I read through it. I thought it was pretty clever.
Yeah, actually, I think maybe it would be a good time to bring up that weird kind of, I don't know if you want to call it a controversy, or the game says that it's from Spectracade.
Yeah.
But it's not, right? It's from Esoterica.
Yeah, I don't understand that myself.
The same company, right? I mean, or did Spectracade buy up Esoterica at one point and then start releasing their games?
I mean, there was a relationship there because Treasure Cove was published by Esoterica, even though it was written by Spectracade, which was Brett Bilberry's company.
I guess maybe they thought it was going to keep going that way or something. Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, so I guess you could say maybe they viewed Spectracade as their cartridge publishing house. I don't know.
All over the instructions, it talks about Spectracade.
Yeah.
It sure does.
Well, I mean, once you build up a name like that, you can't let it go, right?
Well, it does say on the back, it does say Esoterica created it. I'll get to that in a second here, I guess. Mm-hmm. So the cartridge I'm going to describe a little bit. The cartridge shell, it's a gray third-party cartridge shell, which was also used for Sea Devil, and I can't remember if Treasure Cove used it or not, but I think it did. Do you know?
I'd have to look at the pictures.
You mean that kind of white? Yeah,
it's whitish gray, yeah.
That's funny that you said that, because I was looking at an ad for it earlier, and it was a black case.
Oh, really? The one I used to own was gray.
Right. And there was even, I don't know if you remember at one time when, I know this is a different game, but same release or same manufacturer, when there was discussion about Treasure Cove on the Yahoo group. And I think someone had asked, hey, I've seen some of these in black, I've seen some of them in gray. And didn't somebody respond that had made the game and said, well, we did them in black or something like that? And I don't know what those, gray releases were.
I don't know.
Remember that?
No, I don't.
I don't remember. Yeah, the picture of Treasure Cove online is kind of whitish gray.
Yeah. Well, I so these third-party cartridges, when Michael White, when he used to sell the third-party cartridges, his were actually black, and they were the exact same shell. So I know for sure they came in gray and black. It would make sense if they, used them both. That kind of goes back to the first homebrew release that I helped out with was War, and that came in a clear case. And the second one, which was Crazy Climber, came in a black case. And people were like, well, why didn't you go with the same case? I couldn't find the clear cases anymore. So maybe they just, couldn't get the gray shells anymore, so they went with black. At the time, it doesn't matter, but people were like, well, why'd you change it?
Well, now you got to collect both, right?
Right.
Yes.
I need 2 copies of this game, so I can burn them.
That's the gray variant. That's it. $100 more.
Right. So another thing is these cartridges, they have a reputation of not fitting well into the Bally Arcade, but I've not had issues with them. I admit that they're a little bit harder to get inside. If you guys have used them before, you kind of have to press them in really hard. They don't just pop in and pop out. But once they're in, they don't come out or anything. But they're kind of a pain, and I know that the multi-cart by Ken Lill uses these shells, and some people have complained about the cartridge shell because of that, because they do have they fit pretty snug, but, they work.
Yeah.
So, but they're, what else you want?
Third-party games tend to be rarer, so I don't have an actual copy of those.
Yeah, I sold mine years ago because I figured, first of all, well, I guess I won't spoil anything. I think it's already said, since I said I could set the cart on fire, this game is not my favorite in the collection of the Astrocade. Although I have to say, up next is the box, so that's a pretty good segue to that because it happens to be one of my favorite boxes. They did a great job with it. It's got really colorful art that shows your ship plowing through a field of 11 droids, 2 of which are exploding. I really love the art. And Paul, I think you're the one who scanned the box, and I think you must own the boxes, right? Or you got them from someone?
Yeah, Mike White loaned them to me to scan.
Yeah, they're super nice. And if you guys haven't, or Michael, have you seen the box before online?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, it's pretty cool, right?
Yeah, it's definitely got that whole 80s vibe. It would be the same kind of cover that, if it was released by Bally or Astrocade, that they probably would have used, making the game look incredible on the package.
Yeah. But unlike the Bally Astrocade cartridges that were released by Astrocade, they it's not like the generic case. It's almost like a 2600 box. In fact, it looks just like a 2600 box. It's like one piece. It's not like the kind where Astrocade released it. It was a generic box, and the manual's cover was like the front of the box,
Right.
Yeah, Esoterica really had some of the best packaging on the system. Like their tape boxes were actually really nice as well.
Yeah. And so I was just looking at the box today, and I was noticing that the back of the box has a game description, which isn't in the manual. So I quickly OCR'd that, and I have it here in my notes. And it says the androids of Urax-1 are taking over the galaxy. They have imprisoned everyone, and only you, the last courageous human, remains free. Will you emancipate your people? Do you possess the experience and determination to eliminate the alien intruders and their dreaded energy barriers? The fate of the universe rests on your shoulders. Now, what do you think?
You've been waiting to say that all day, haven't you?
Yeah.
Were you practicing ahead of time?
No.
Yeah, I don't think they were quite consistent between their story on the box and their story in the manual.
Well, I have the printed manual here. I don't remember what their story is, but I think you're right. I think it's
it just says, android spaceships have begun building force fields in deep space. Your job, should you choose to accept it, is to seek out and eliminate these alien intruders. So, it gets a lot darker, but when it gets to, the entirety of the human race has been imprisoned. So, I don't know, maybe this is just the training period and, things were better back then.
Right. I was a little curious, too, about how much this game cost. And it was a little hard for me to track down, but I finally found an ad in the November 1983 issue of the Arcadian where ABC Hobbycraft was selling this game. And they were selling it for $32.95, which was quite a bit more expensive than the other games that were being sold by Astrocade, which usually ranged about $20. So maybe because it was a little later, I don't know. And it's only a 4K game, so. Okay, so now it's up to whatever comments we've got. I've got plenty of them, but why don't you guys go first? And if you don't cover them, I'll throw mine in there.
So talking about the manual, they've got a scoring guide, and they must expect people to do way better in this game than any of us did.
Oh, speak for yourself. I flipped this game a few times.
Why didn't you submit it to the High Score Club then?
I forgot.
Yeah. Yeah, they expect you to get over 90,000 points for your diploma, I don't know, did any of us even get up to 5,000?
No, I couldn't. I played it again today, too, and I couldn't do very well. And I guess we should give a little bit of background here. This game is similar, sort of, to Asteroids. It's got that look and feel. It doesn't really play exactly the same.
Yeah, the ship navigation is like Asteroids or like Space War or something where you rotate and then you fire your rocket to go forward. So, you can't just push left to go left or anything.
Yeah, and instead of having 16 degrees of movement, you have 8, which is quite a big difference. It's like only half as many directions you can go.
Yeah.
The chip, in my opinion, turns way too slow. That, to me, it would have been great if, I don't know, maybe they tweaked it a little bit.
I could see that. I mean, I don't think it's too slow, but I could see it being, a little faster, and it would have been okay.
I could not get past, which sector is it? Sector 4?
Yeah.
Sector 4 is the one where you have, like, the androids sitting in the middle of a force field.
Yeah, and they call it the Space Fortress, they call it.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's called the Space Fortress. It's like a simple maze.
Forget it. No, not
right.
happening.
Yeah. It's like pretty impossible.
So I wonder why they didn't use the knob to turn, because that seems like a obvious use for that.
How many games did any games outside of the in-house stuff use that knob at all?
Well, you've got ICBM Attack, which used the knobs and two...
No, don't. That control scheme? Oh, please.
You're thinking of the control scheme that Michael White hacked?
Yeah.
That's a hack. The control scheme is great.
Right.
They released their own controller for that game, so...
Right.
Yeah.
But, yeah, you can actually set it up pretty well in MAME if, to use, a trackball or something.
Oh, really?
Or a mouse, even.
It looks like a cool game.
It is a very fun game.
Past the wacky control hack that was done to it.
Yeah, the control hack is unplayable. It makes the game unplayable, which it's actually more playable, though, because you can't play it at all otherwise.
Yeah.
Right.
Since we skipped ahead to the fourth sector, I want to go back a little bit and talk about the force fields, because they're the droids are apparently building these things, but they're not actually building them, because when you get to each sector, there's already a force field complete. So in Sector 1, there's a small force field, and it surrounds the entire screen, and you can go outside of it, but the droids can't. And on that sector, you have to destroy 8 droids. On Sector 2, the large force field surrounds the entire screen again, and you can't run into the force field, by the way, otherwise you get destroyed. And on that screen, you have to kill 14. On the third one, there's no force field present at all, so it's actually like an open... It looks very much... It doesn't look like asteroids, but it plays much more like asteroids than the first 2 sectors. And on that screen, you have to kill 14. And on Sector 4, which none of us have been able to clear, except I did it in MAME when I cheated, but I had to. I wanted to see what kept coming, and plus I was disassembling the game, and I was trying to see what would happen and other things that were ahead. So in Sector 4, you only have to destroy one of they're called bombs in that. They're actually not droids at all.
Oh, okay.
And in that, there's there's a timer, but really what it is kind of you basically have to navigate a simple maze. Think of how there's T mazes for, what are those worms you cut in half and then you can set them into the maze and...
like a tapeworm?
Yeah, tapeworm. You know how they can train them to go left or right in a T maze? Well, the maze isn't much more complicated than that, really. It's got one more twist to it, but it's so hard to navigate.
Yeah, it's so hard to fly the ship.
Yeah. If it wasn't timed, it wouldn't be a problem. Once you get to the center, you still have to make sure to hit one of the guys. I mean, I was able to do it, but only killing myself hundreds of times, so... Yeah. But Chris makes a note when we were playing this game. He pointed out to me, and I hadn't even thought of this, and I was like, I'm not sure if I believe you. But he said, hey, doesn't this remind you of Gravatar? And I said, not really. And so we ended up pulling up Gravatar and MAME, and wouldn't you know it, there's no doubt in my mind that they were inspired in 2 ways from Gravatar. 1, with the maze, sort of, and 2, with the level of difficulty. Gravatar is basically impossible to play, in my opinion. And I think it's considered one of the tougher games out there, and it is. We did mention this game can be played with 2 people at a time. I think player 1 appears on the left side and player 2 appears on the right side?
Correct.
I think that's right.
Yeah, and just like in The Incredible Wizard, you both can shoot at each other and you can hit the other person. Now, we didn't play this too much. I didn't find it better, but Michael, I would like to hear your point of view since you did play it 2-player and you seem to like it.
Yeah, actually, I didn't even realize... the first time I had played it, before the holidays, I was playing by myself, and I guess I probably should have read the manual because I tried that training sector and was just like, what is this all about? And just kept crashing in the middle. If you go into the training sector, basically it's just to get used to the controls of the game. According to the manual, this sector is designed to test your knowledge of lessons 1 through 4. You must avoid the barrier in the center of the screen.
Okay.
So basically, in the center of the screen is a big rectangular box, and if you hit it, you die.
Right.
So there's absolutely no reason to go there unless you want to just see how god awful the controls are for the thrust, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
So once you get past the training sector and you actually go to play the game, you can actually play with 2 players simultaneous, which obviously I dug. I actually got my son to play. Okay. We didn't get a chance to record anything, but we did check it out. Yeah. He had no idea what was going on and just died horribly.
Is he familiar with games like Asteroids? I mean,
no, he's probably never played anything that old. I guess he did get an NES Classic Mini for his birthday.
Oh my gosh, how much did you pay for that sucker?
No, oh my god. You know, there's a thread on Atari 8s that's like, I don't know, 200 pages long about everybody trying to get that thing. I just went on the day it came out. You just got to have connections, man. You got to know. There are these websites out there, and if you know the SKU number to the product, you can plug it in and find out what stores are getting it and how many, and you just go to that store.
Oh, really? So you paid, how much did you pay for it then? Just the retail price?
Yeah.
How much was the retail price? I don't even know. I remember it was selling for like $200.
I think it was like $59.99.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he's really a Nintendo kid, so, you know, for him that was cool to be able to play these older games. Yeah. But one of these days, I guess I got to break out, start off maybe with the 2600, then we'll go through the whole Bally library, move on to maybe to ColecoVision.
Yeah.
You know, I'll bring him through like the different
classical education.
Yes, exactly.
You know, my son grew up that way. He actually like started off with the first he started off with the Amiga, but then he started off with the 2600, and he used to play those, and all the way, basically any system that came out in the 80s, he was playing as a young kid. So
cool. I definitely think if you play it with 2 people, it's going to be more fun regardless. You know, if you just continually crash into things or the ships just appear right in front of you and you get killed, not so much fun. But at least with 2 people, you know, we tried to kill each other a few times, so that was fun.
Yeah.
Obviously, the first couple of sectors, you know, if anybody wants to talk about hints, you don't even have to go inside the force field. Just kind of stay where you are and shoot. I think on Sector 2, the ship on the right-hand side is actually a little bit inside of the force field. So it
is, yeah.
Yeah, it took a while to teach my son to rotate, because, you know, the rotation takes forever.
I don't think that. I have to say, and I'm not making this as a joke just because you don't like the rotation. I think the ship's movement is the strong point of this game, because I find I can control it really easily. Everything else is its weak point, but we'll get to that, I guess.
Okay. You know what I might be too used to is, now you know what I'm going to have to do? I'm going to have to go and fire up asteroids on the 2600 and see which one turns faster. But when you played it, you were playing it in MAME, or you were playing it on the Astrocade?
On the Astrocade, and I originally played it with the Astrocade controller too. I didn't have any issues whatsoever.
The thing is, you know, when you turn with this ship, the control thing for me is what killed the game. Well, it's among a couple of things. I think if that was tweaked a little bit better, the ship drifts. So if you don't correct, you know, you don't do a course correction, you're just going to keep floating away.
I had mentioned how there's X amount of droids per screen that you have to destroy before you can leave it.
Right.
But actually, there's more droids that are on the screen than are needed. So you can actually, like, let's say you have to destroy 8 droids. What happens is only 4 droids can ever appear on the screen at a time. If there's 1 player or 2 player, it doesn't matter. Only 4 droids can appear. And if you don't shoot them, I don't know if you guys, because I kind of tried to put this game through its paces to see what would happen. If you don't shoot those droids, they just get faster and faster and faster until they're going so fast you can't shoot them.
Really?
And you basically have to start over.
Oh, it actually becomes impossible to shoot them?
Yeah. And just try it out. It's interesting. You just wait. So that's, in my eyes, that's like a bug, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's meant to be that way. Because otherwise you've just lost the entire human race and you're screwed.
Well, you know, they do seem to do weird things with time limits. Like, I don't know if you noticed on the 4th stage with the maze, like if you die by going into the force field, then the time limit doesn't reset. So, like, you probably only have kind of one shot to get through.
Right.
Well, I think you lose all your lives if you don't clear. Well, I always lose all my lives anyway, I suppose. So never mind. I was gonna say because I never can get past that, but it's because I just can't get past that level.
Yeah, but like if you actually wait until the time runs out, then you'll die, but the timer resets. But if you just crash into the maze toward the end, then like you'll restart, but you might only have a few seconds to go through the entire maze.
Oh, yeah, really?
That
sucks. I know what you're talking about with hitting that the timer keeps on going. So you mean if I just sat there, it would reset? In other words, if I don't crash into...
Yeah, like you lose a ship when the time runs out, but it will, if you have a ship left, then the timer restarts on the next go.
Right, which at 30 seconds though, right? No, it doesn't start at like almost 0.
No, I'm saying like, let's say you spend 15 seconds navigating through the maze, and then you die. You're going to restart with 15 seconds left.
Right, because the reason is because it's not just a timer. It's I think it's supposed to represent a door closing, and once that door closes, then you can't get to the bombs, and the space fortress just explodes or whatever.
I mean, that's what it is, but just from a gameplay perspective, like you can basically waste 2 lives instead of 1 because you don't have enough time to get through it the second time.
This game has a lot going for it, except it falls short on a lot of, and basically everything. It almost does it. It almost does it in so many areas. First of all, it's too hard. I think the next thing I want to bring up.
Well, I would say it starts out way too easy, and then it gets too hard.
Like with like the first and second sector, you don't even have to move in order to clear the screen.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, literally, you can just stay there in a safe zone you start out in and spin around and shoot everything, which is, when I was doing the high score competition, that's what I did, because of course that helps you get a higher score because you don't lose any lives, but it was just super boring. Yep,
exactly. And the other thing we haven't really mentioned is that the droids, they just appear randomly on the screen. Like they just pop into existence anywhere, They can even appear right on top of the player's ship, which kills you immediately. And that's super, super unfair.
Yeah.
It'd be nice if they drifted in, or at least just appear close to you, but give you a second to fire at it.
Yeah, I had the worst problems on the third stage with that, because it seemed especially bad once you died, because then you might spawn right next to something and die in 0.5 seconds.
Yeah, I actually noted that down too. I think I put it in a section on bugs that it's almost I don't think it is a bug, but it's just so unfair. You can
I mean, call it a bug or call it bad design, but it's not either way. I guess that is one reason I kind of liked the playing it 2 players better, because I felt like it wasn't quite as overwhelming in that third stage. So
I could see that.
Yeah.
If you play for 2 players, because I'm trying. Do you take turns on the Space Fortress, or are you both in there at the same time?
What do you mean? When you
reach the Sector 4, if you have a 2-player game, I don't know if either of you reached that, because I don't think we did.
No, we didn't. We didn't make it with 2 people.
Yeah, it's been a while since I did that, but I think you end up with both players simultaneously, and you kind of start out from opposite ends, and I think that made it kind of symmetrical, so you could, if either player makes it, you did it. But I played with Billy, and we got through the third stage a few times, which is better than I did playing at 1 player, but we were no good at stage 4.
Yeah, stage 4 is, like we said, really hard.
Adam, you said that that thing is like a door. That green on my TV, it was green. On sector 4, is that it?
I don't remember. I don't remember what color it is. The thing that looks like a timer counting down, or
Now, do you have to?
I don't remember reading that in a manual, but that's how I pictured it. I pictured it as a sliding door that's closing, and you've got to get in there quick before. That's why you've got a time limit. And maybe I'm reading too much into it. I honestly don't think the programmer probably meant it to be that. Maybe it's just a timer. I don't know. What do you think, Paul?
Well, I mean, we can look at the instructions.
Why would we do that? I've gone 30 years without looking at instructions. Why would I start now?
See, in sectors 4 and 6, the droids have retreated to their space fortress located in the center of a maze. Players must maneuver the maze and shoot 1 droid before the door of their fortress shuts.
There you go. So maybe I did read that, and that's how I'm remembering it. But okay.
I dig the intro. I don't know what you want to call that intro music or whatever it is. that sounded cool. That was pretty much it, though. I don't like the sound the thrust makes. The thrust. I think my son called it, he used the F word.
Which F word?
For gas.
Oh.
He said, Dad, it sounds like the ships are farting.
Oh.
And the fire, when you actually shoot. Didn't really dig either one of those sound effects. And the other thing that's weird is it almost kind of mutes, or not mutes, but when you shoot and I think you hit a ship, like it's almost like the sound level goes down. Do you guys know what I'm talking about or not?
I do. It's interesting you say that, because I was going to ask you guys, because I didn't notice it on real hardware, but I noticed it in MAME. So maybe I didn't notice it.
Yeah, no, we definitely noticed that. But yeah, that was kind of weird. And honestly, I mean, I think the game has a lot of potential. I just think it needed to be tweaked a little bit.
Yeah, that's what it would take.
There's no skill levels right off the bat. This game needs, what skill level do you want to play at? Like so many of the Bally games had.
Yeah. I actually don't like that. I think that's kind of... I feel like it should be tuned so, like, many players can start off and they can find their own way through a game. I think if you're going to have, like... I don't know if you remember, but on the Atari 2600, some of the games, like, I don't know, after the Atari had been out for a few years, they started having these kid levels, which, like, on the screen would become a little teddy bear. And I feel like if you're not going to play a game like the way it's meant to be played, and you're going to make some game that's kidderized, basically. But then, then there's the other extreme. I think this guy was thinking, who programmed this, that, I don't think we mentioned who programmed this game either, did we? This game was programmed by Dan Drescher and J.P. Curran. Or the game design was by them. I don't know if one and both of them programmed it.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that worked, but I think they pretty much did all the Esoterica games, right?
Yeah, they did, but we haven't mentioned it, so it's important, I think. Yeah. This way they can write us some hate mail. They can be like,
I was going to say, right after this, the man you want to write to is Adam.
Yes, Adam Doe.
Yeah, hopefully they'll still give us an interview.
That's okay.
Yeah, I like your tape games.
Yes. Well, hold on a second.
Super Skier is great.
Adam, you're talking about the Atari games having different skills or something later on? Yeah. So you're telling me when you had the 2600, you never flicked the little skill switch on it?
I did later, not as a kid, not growing up.
Really? Like Space Invaders, where you could hit the switch and you had either...
No, I could switch different games, but are you talking about like the A-B switch? That would like make it harder? No, I never did that.
Yeah, the difficulty switch.
Never did that.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah. I might have been playing on the easy levels.
Mr. Hardcore here.
I might have been stuck in the easy levels. I don't know. I only had 6 games for the 2600 back in the 80s, and I'd borrow some here or there. So, and my games were all these games no one's ever heard of. Like, my only game that anyone probably could remember was an Activision game called it was called Choplifter. Or not Choplifter, Chopper Command, which is a pretty good shoot 'em up. It was kind of like a clone of Defender.
Gotcha.
I do have a couple comments about sound effects. I think they're pretty weird. I think they're weird in a good way because what they kind of do is, I think they're making them a little random, so they're never like repeated twice. I'm not going to say I like the sound effects because I don't like the sound effects, but I like that they tried some random element to make them not be too repetitive, even though they're repetitive anyway. And I could see how they could sound like a fart. So tell your son he's right. We've all talked about, we've gotten to the 4th level, that was it. So I'm going to say at the end of the game, the last sector that the player reached is not displayed with a score. And this means that the player has to remember how far they reached, which I guess is not a big deal, but I thought it was going to be because I thought as I played this game, I was going to get further. And in the high score club...
You thought you were going to get to stage 100 and you're just going to lose track.
Not exactly that high, but one of the things that in the high score club, I wanted everyone to be able to keep track of what level they reached so we could like compete on that level too. But as it turns out, no one else played this game except for Paul and I. And this is another one of those games when it ends, there's no way to restart it. You have to actually press reset console.
Yes, I made that note also. Have to get reset to go back to the main menu.
Yeah. I don't know if it's because they were it was a 4K game, and I've looked at the code, and I'm going to go into that in a little bit of detail later on, but there's, I think there was definitely room to, like, basically just reset, because you can just jump to the beginning of the ROM, and there's a lot of games actually released by Astrocade that just do that. After it displays your score for a few seconds, it jumps to the beginning of the ROM, and your game resets, and it's just 2 bytes. That's all it takes to do. Man, there's got to be something good we can say about this game, right?
Wow.
Oh yeah, the box. I already did.
No, you already did that.
I think the graphics are all right.
Yeah, the graphics are okay.
Pretty good, good droid designs.
Yeah.
Have several different kinds of enemy ships.
Yeah.
Oh no, I like I said, I think the game, if it was tweaked a little bit, it could definitely be more fun. What's a shame is you have a lot of guys who hack the original, Atari games and try to improve on them and stuff. It'd be great if we had somebody to do that on the Astrocade, but
and this would be a good one to tweak because
it
really is pretty close to being a good game. It's just it falls short. We played this during the High Score Club in round 13 and back in November and December, and I thought we would record in December, but just all these things happened, and I'm glad I was able to do a quick episode with Chris just to fill in some time there. Cause, not that I'm blaming there's no blame here, by the way. It's just, who cares? It's just we record when we record. If we had a schedule, I'd probably just miss it every time anyway. But the only people, like I said, who participated were Paul and I. I scored 4,150 points, and I reached level 4, as I've said. And Paul, you got 3,900 points. And I have to say, even after using save states and being able to use and getting over and over and over, the most points I could get was 7,600, and I reached level 12 doing that. And that's totally cheating, and it doesn't count. It doesn't count. But the game got so incredibly tough, even like being able to start over, I would get killed instantly. And according to the manual, scoring between 5,000 and 15,000 points means that you need to return to the training sector. You are not ready to play big time. So there's no one, I think, that could play this game.
Yeah. So I was surprised you said your score was that low going through all those stages, because what the manual says is that a droid is worth 50 points times its sector number. So, if that was right, then by the time you got to level 10, you'd be getting 500 points a ship.
Oh, definitely. That didn't happen. Yeah, I definitely got to level 12. I was noting down how far I got. And that was, you have to kill X number of ships on every level. So, basically, if you reach a certain level, you kind of max out, because you can't. It's not like there's a various number of droids that can appear on the screen. It's like if you reach level 3, you've killed, let's see, 14 plus 8. So you've killed 22, and on that level, everyone's going to have the same score at the beginning of that level. So if you all reach level 3 and then kill, the only difference will be how many you've destroyed on that level to get a difference in points. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Does the count restart when you die, or does it keep track?
Does the count? No, it keeps track. Like if I lose a ship, do I have to start and kill at 8 again? Is that what you mean?
Right.
No, you keep. Luckily, otherwise this game I would have tossed it out the window. I wanted to bring up too that in the May 1994 issue of the Arcadian, in the game player column, Michael Prostis wrote, Lloyd Friedman of New Jersey warns Blast Droids, worst game ever. Watch your money, folks. This game was never submitted to the game player for review. However, Kevin O'Neill was much more optimistic in his October 1983 review in the Niagara Bugs Bulletin newsletter, which you can read on BallyAlley.com. He concludes his article with, overall, I found Blast Droids to be a very good game compared to the asteroid carts, although it wasn't quite as good as some. I feel it's well worth the price. Well, Kevin, I think you are wrong. But it's somebody liked it.
What was he comparing it to, like asteroids for the 2600 or something like that?
He doesn't actually say in particular, no. He does mention asteroids for the 2600 in it, and he says something that's a little vague, but it seems to me that he thinks that Blast Droids is better than the 2600 version of asteroids, which is preposterous. Something I did is I went through, because while I was playing this game in the High Score Club, I had made a whole bunch of notes as I was playing the game, and today I sort of went through and I compiled those into a couple of paragraphs. And before I read it, though, I'd like to see if there's anything else you guys want to add about this game, because it's not a summary, because I have quite a bit more here to talk about, especially game bugs, but basically gameplay elements. Did we miss anything or overlook anything?
I don't think so. Other than, like I said, I would highly recommend playing it with 2 people.
I did play with 2 people.
Co-op.
And I did, and I found the best thing about that was we could both make fun of it. So, Chris didn't think this game was as bad as I did. Like I said, I have some feedback from him. It's short, but I would say this is. I compare this game to maybe 280 Zap and Dodgem, which is
no.
which
really?
I think is the worst. Yeah, I think that's the worst game on the system, and I think it's on that level. And it's not because it's not the game is. It's got, like I said, it's so close, but it's like it wasn't play tested. It's like we're done with it. They're like, we're done. We programmed it all day long, not just all day, but however long it took them, and we're shipping it. And we're sick of this game. Maybe they just didn't want to spend another minute on it.
Yeah.
But or maybe they fell into that trap where they tested it only themselves, and
yeah, maybe they got really good at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because I didn't spend like hours and hours practicing or anything, but the fourth level was just such a wall.
Yeah.
So it's like I'd play the first two levels and they'd be really boring, and I'd play the third level and I'd usually die, but occasionally I'd win, and then the fourth level it just didn't have really any opportunity to practice it because it would take so long to get to it, and then I'd die in like 10 seconds.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I agree. So let me kind of give the summary here, and please feel free to interrupt me if you have anything to say, because I don't want to sound like a monologue here, and I'm bound to do it otherwise. So I played Blast Droids using MAME so that I could use save states to get past Sector 4's Space Fortress, which I've already said. It took me about 7 or 8 times to finally manage to pass that level. It's pretty tough. That's an understatement, by the way. Sector 6 is another Space Fortress, but this time it's even harder than the first one. I used save states a few times to try to pass the Space Fortress, but eventually I gave up in frustration. The passageway to the room where you must blow up one of the bombs is really just too narrow. I eventually lost many dozens of ships, maybe even hundreds of ships, and not exaggerating, on Sector 6. This level isn't only difficult, it's downright impossible for me, and possibly just impossible. Playing the game with save states effectively gives you infinite lives, but this doesn't make Blast Droids any easier to play. Navigating the maze of the Space Fortress is bad enough, but I've not been able to even reach the center room to destroy even one droid, which I eventually did though, let alone the 8 droids that must be destroyed to clear this level. Plus, which is a mistake by the way, it says you have to clear 8 droids, but you only have to shoot one of them. Plus there's still a 30-second time limit, which makes the task much more difficult. I eventually did manage to get past level 6 using save states, and what's weird is that it took me about 15 ships to get past the Space Fortress on Sector 4, but I cleared the much more difficult Space Fortress on level 6 the very first time I got to it, which is basically a miracle. So it looks like you can get better at this game, if that proves anything, but this game is... I'm not going to rate this game because I think Chris will just edit it out, but I think if my statement hasn't been clear enough, this game has got some issues. So I wanted to discuss, what do you think could make this game a little better?
Skill levels.
Okay.
I would like to see the ship respond a little bit quicker when you go to rotate. Change the sound effects on the thrust. Change the sound effects on the fire. Yeah. I think, like I said, I think the control of the ship needs to be tweaked a little.
Okay.
Only to make it a little easier when you get to that Sector 4.
Well, I think what would make it easier there, too, would be if you had 16 different degrees of motion. So, because you basically are making these big turns, and it's difficult. I was just about to say maybe you guys can go back and try it in MAME just to see how long it takes you to do it, but don't do it. Don't bother.
Okay.
It's hard. Yeah. I think the biggest thing that needs to be changed. I don't think, did we mention that this game has problems with collision detection?
I don't think we did.
Yeah, it has severe issues with collision detection. Yeah, that needs to be fixed.
And you mean specifically shooting things, right?
Yeah, shooting. Like, you can run into walls easy peasy, but if there was any collision detection I wish didn't work, was that. Like once in a while pass through a wall by accident, that'd be great.
Do you think you're supposed to shoot some of the ships more than once to destroy them?
Okay. Thank you.
I think that's true, but there wasn't really a good indication of when you hit it. If they flashed or something, it would have been better, I think.
I don't think that is the case, because otherwise it'd be that way every time, and it's not that way every time. Sometimes you hit them once and it blows up. Sometimes you hit it twice and it blows up. I think I want to talk about a trick that I read about, which is kind of neat. And I didn't try this trick, but I think it's pretty cool. And I mentioned it actually just a few days ago. I went back to the original posting in the High Score Club, and I added this on February 6th. And basically what I said was, I was flipping through back issues of Astrocade newsletters, and I ran into a neat trick for Blast Droids. I'd completely forgot about this tip. But I'd originally posted about it to the Bally Alley Yahoo group in 2007, and here's what I wrote. While going through Niagara Bug Bulletin newsletters for program listings, I found this neat and for most people, I bet, impossible to perform trick. This trick is an excerpt from something called cartridge swapping, which is in the, I think, January 1984 issue. And I say I think the January 84 because it's not labeled as such. Kevin says, the person who loves this game, by the way, says, the menu sequence for the selection of game parameters in the cartridge games is the perfect opportunity to swap cards. The following are little tricks that I've discovered that get pretty interesting results. First, play Incredible Wizard and write down your score. Now, without resetting, put in the Blast Droids card, which all of you guys have, right? Like the original. From the menu, pick Blast Droids, Training Sector. Swap to the Incredible Wizard. Now choose 2 players, and the rest of the options are as requested and needed. Now when the game begins, you should be starting this with the last score that you had, but with a full supply of men. Hacking does have its rewards, folks. And I haven't tried this trick, but it sounds pretty tricky. Cool. But it's interesting that I didn't realize you could swap cards at the menu. But and for anyone who's not familiar, that is actually taken advantage of on the multi-cart. And the multi-cart has games on it that basically you flip the dip switches. It basically loads a basic game into memory. Then it puts itself into a mode where it doesn't detect when a cartridge is being taken out and or inserted. So then you take the multi-cart out, put in basic, or flip to the basic cartridge on the multi-cart, and then you press equal or go or something like that, whatever it tells you on the screen to press, and then it automatically will start the basic game. So you can actually load basic games from cartridge that way, which works pretty well.
Yeah, I guess it must be something with the RAM values it's filling in.
Yeah, it just must be sharing some RAM. Yeah.
I do like the idea of using the knob for turning, because then you could kind of turn as quickly as you wanted, and you'd have a lot more degrees of freedom.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing would be, well, like the first 2 stages I'd rework to make them at least a little challenging, like not have that safe zone you start out in. Then the 3rd stage, I mean, I feel like it would be a lot better if they just added some sort of logic so that, like, you wouldn't respawn close to a ship and a ship would never spawn close to you. Because that's where it got really frustrating, was like you'd respawn and just instantly die. And then, yeah, definitely, fix the 4th stage so that every time you die, the timer resets. And then maybe just make it a little easier. I would want to change the controls so that you were able to use the knob to steer, because then you could control how fast you wanted to turn, and you'd have more degrees of freedom.
Yeah, there's an arcade game that actually controls that way called Mad Planets. There has a controller on it, kind of like a spinner, like Tempest 2000, or Tempest, not Tempest 2000. That's a Jaguar game, and so it kind of, I think, would be like what you're talking about.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm going to show my arcade ignorance here. Does Asteroids have a spinner, or is that just a joystick?
It's neither. It's just buttons.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right.
Left and right, yeah.
Yeah, I remember now.
I'm sorry, Paul, but I have to kick you off the show. Your ignorance is it's too deep. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think they'll probably have one at the Arcade Expo. I think I played it there before.
Yeah. Oh, Michael, that brings up a point. I'm going to be meeting Paul in a couple of weeks. I'm going to be going to the Louisville Arcade Expo at the beginning of March. So going to be spending a couple of days there in Louisville. I'm actually going to be sharing a room with Ken. We're going to be rooming up, and he's going to bring an Astrocade along and playing some Astrocade games, playing some arcade games, having fun.
Then as far as kind of going through the stages, the first couple of stages, I'd kind of get rid of the safe zone, so it'd be a little more challenging. Then the 3rd stage, the biggest thing you could do would be to add some logic so that you wouldn't spawn next to a ship and a ship wouldn't spawn right next to you, because that's where you really started to get frustrated, because you feel like you died and it wasn't your fault, because something just kind of spawned practically on top of you.
Yeah, well, not practically. I mean, oftentimes that did happen, exactly. I mean, and sometimes twice in a row. So I don't know how they could have left that in the game. I mean,
yeah.
It doesn't even seem random, really. I mean, if it was random, it would only happen sometimes, because you're just a tiny little ship compared to the size of the playfield. And it's like almost like they purposely put in code to make it appear on top of you, because if it was random, it wouldn't happen as often. I think. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like I don't know. I felt like it was random, but maybe not. I guess, but you've got quite a bit of ships spawning there.
No, that's true too.
The fourth stage with the maze, I'd definitely make it so that the timer would reset every time you died, because that's really frustrating.
And give it longer than 30 seconds too.
Yeah, and then I think I would just make it easier, because it's just a little much. If they want to have some crazy maze at stage 50, that's fine, but stage 4 is a little early for that, I think.
Right. Yeah. And considering that I was using infinite lives basically to just play the game, and I couldn't get past stage 12, if there's a stage 50, I don't think there's anyone who's seen it.
Yeah, we've got to figure out the RAM value to put in to just start us at stage 50.
It doesn't actually ask you to how many ships, because otherwise it'd be easy to figure that out in the disassembly that I was doing. But I probably could figure that out pretty easily. All I'd have to do is examine in MAME. You can look at memory locations live while the game is playing, and I could lose a ship. Well, I don't even have to try to lose a ship. I just lose them all the time, and I could see what values change, and I could compare that and see every single time I lose a ship which value changes, and that's the spot.
Yeah, well, I was thinking the level, but that's actually a good suggestion too. Is just having at least some mode where you have more lives to start out with.
Yeah, like 100.
Yeah. Yeah, stage 4 is as far as I got, so that's all I got.
Okay, then I want to start talking about the bugs, and I'm sure you guys noticed some of these, but we haven't talked about some of them. I think this game is pretty buggy, and not just like what we've talked about so far, but there's other problems, and some of these I'm going to go into further detail. For one thing, there's, like I said, the collision detection between the player's shots and the droid ships is terrible. There have been instances when I've hit a ship 3-4 times before it's destroyed. Unlike in some other games that have occasional poor collision detection, Blast Droids' hit detection is quite broken. In this case, direct hits to the baddies don't pass through the droids. They simply hit the droid, disappear, just as if it should have been destroyed, but it isn't. Which is kind of where, I come up with this. I suppose that the manual could have explained this away with something like, occasionally, some droids have armor plating on their ships which require additional hits to penetrate before the droid can be destroyed. But the manual even misses this opportunity to, quote, fix this unmissable oversight. So that's one bug. Bug number 1. Right, bug number 2. Sometime after a droid appears on the screen, it doesn't move. When this happens, it also can't be destroyed when you shoot it. I've had this happen about 2 or 3 times, and that's on real hardware, so it's not in emulation. And other ones will keep moving around. So did either of you encounter that?
I didn't see anybody that sat there, but I definitely did see what you were talking about, where you got to shoot it like 3 or 4 times. I just thought that was the gameplay.
Maybe it is. It doesn't say in the manual, though, and it's awkward because you don't know how many times you have to hit it then.
Right.
Yeah. And here's a bug that limits your player movement. If the player thrusts straight up the screen 4 times, because the screen wraps, then after 4 screen wraps, the player gets stuck at the very top of the screen. You can no longer move up or down. You can still move left and right, however. You can still shoot droids, and if you manage to clear the sector during this, then you can move clearly or freely again on the next screen. And have you thrust around the screen a lot and discover this?
No. I felt like it was more dangerous if you started moving really quickly in that.
Exactly.
Well, I did it. I was just messing around to see how fast you could move, and that's how I discovered that. I did it on the first screen where you can just thrust up, and you start moving so fast, which is another bug that I'm going to talk about here in a minute. So this bug I found out because of the bug above. So go to the top of the screen and get stuck. Now, once you're stuck, press right or left and gain speed. You can continuously increase your speed. There doesn't seem to be an upper limit. Eventually, you'll be moving so quickly that you'll flash on and off 4 or 5 different locations. So you'll be appearing steadily in 4 locations at once. Yes. Okay.
You're activating your warp drive then.
Yeah.
Right. But this is what's weird. It gets stranger. If you fire at the droids from these locations, you'll actually fire from 3 different locations. So that is, there's no mistaking that was not meant to be.
I gotta try that now.
Wow.
Yeah.
I want to see a video of this now.
Another bug. Your ship actually moves faster than your own shots when you're going very quickly. If you run into your own shots, you lose a ship, which is weird. But I guess it might not be a bug. You do move really fast, and I guess it makes sense because you can kill the other player that way. But it's pretty stupid that you can outrun your own shot,
Yeah.
Well, will it actually Like if you shoot forward, will you then immediately run into it, or do you just mean like if you wrap around?
I haven't tried it by wrapping around, but I found this out when I was going really fast. I was going faster than my shot, and I shot and bam, ran right into it.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the physics behind that.
All right. The droid speed, I said this already, but the longer they stay on the screen, the faster they get, and once they're moving really fast, you can't destroy them, which that's got to be a bug. Sometimes I get killed over and over, but that's what I noted down, but I can't remember the circumstances, but I think it's because, I don't think it's really a bug, but I think what was happening was I was just kept appearing and then getting killed by something that was appearing on top of me, which isn't fair.
Yeah.
And once, and this only happened to me once, on level 2, I fired a shot at a droid and 3 of them disappeared at once, which was pretty weird. That's it for bugs. Did I miss anything? I mean, there's some pretty weird ones in there,
Yeah, I think you've tested this more thoroughly than the programmers did.
I think so. Which was kind of fun to find some of them, though. I mean, in a way, finding these weird bugs, especially the ones when I was firing from 3 different places at once, was more fun than playing the game. And the next part, which I want to talk about, was without a doubt more fun than playing the game. And that's my disassembly of the game, because I decided, because I wasn't having very much fun playing the game, I was like, well, what's wrong with this game anyway? So I started disassembling it, and and eventually I'm like, why am I disassembling this game? This game is just not fun, it's not worth it.
Yeah, because you're going to fix it, right?
No, I'm not going to fix this game. I'd rather start from scratch, Yeah, but so basically what I have here is a couple of things that I discovered during my disassembly. And do you think I should talk about, I'm not going to talk about the tools. Basically, I used a few tools like MAME and some disassemblers and some assemblers to take the 4K binary image and work out some of where the graphics were, some of what the code did. But I decided not to explore the code too much because I started asking myself why. But I did want to see the graphics. I want to see if they're like in later levels, if like past level 12, if there are extra ships, and there's not. So here's what I said. I began disassembling Blast Droids just to see what made it tick. But I didn't pursue it too far because of like what I already said. Here's what I came across. The Blast Droids, it does use the system's ROMs, a built-in vectoring system for moving the ships around the screen, which is pretty typical. I think only a few of the later games don't do that. And for graphic patterns, which is what I'm going to talk about here, the player ship, it's made up of 4x4 pixels, so it's got 4 to 8 different ships with cardinal directions that show the exhaust, and the same exact pictures or patterns, which is what they call them for the Astrocade, that don't show the exhaust. The player's bullet is 1 pixel. The player ship explosion, which is 3 frames of animation. The first frame is 5x5. The next one is 7x6, and the next one is 10x8. So it grows pretty big. And the droid patterns, there's 6 different droids, and I've made up names for them. Sector 1, it's a UFO, which you've all seen that one. It's 8x3 pixels, and it's although I think that's one of the things we both, or the 3 of us, have said is the enemies look pretty good. I think they use the color pretty good. They're drawn well. They're not animated, but they move. But they don't have like more than 1 frame. There's not like 2 frames of animation for each one. Like, for instance, the baddies in Wizard of War, which are animated.
Yeah.
So the first one is the UFO. The second one is, I call it the square satellite, because that's kind of what it looks like. That's 10x8 pixels. And this is all comparison. Remember, your ship is 4x4. The third sector has, I call it the barbell droid, which is exactly what it looks like to me. And that's 11x8 pixels. And I think that's probably my favorite droid. Maybe the one that's on sector 4. No, probably the next. I'm skipping ahead too far. The next one is I call it the bomb droid, and that's the space fortress. And I call it the bomb droid because supposedly they blow up the space fortress. So that makes sense to me. The sector 5 has I call it the bow tie droid. And finally, the last one is the barrel droid. And that's on sector 7. And that's 10x7 pixels. I think that's the biggest one. No, actually, I guess the bomb droid is the biggest one. And finally, the droid's explosion, they're just 1 frame of animation, and they're 10x8 pixels. And I don't know if I should do that for future episodes. I mean, did you find that interesting, or is that, I don't know. I found it interesting to at least do. I'm not sure if it's interesting to listen to. But so that's all I have to say about Blast Droids. It's a game that, if you're a collector and you have to have everything, this might be one of those games that you pass up anyway.
Yes, give it to me.
Oh.
Tell me where it is so I can get a hold of one.
Oh, so you don't have the original of this one?
No, and I remember. Oh God, I don't know how many years back, but this was on eBay, brand new, sealed in the box, and I think Treasure Cove was also. I don't think they went for a lot. I think they only went for like $100, but I don't think I was paying $100 for Bally games back then.
Would you pay $100 for it now, new in the box?
Yeah, sure.
Would you?
Not $260. There's a copy of Treasure Cove on one of the game sites out there. That's a little bit much.
Especially since it's public domain. That one's actually freeware. So.
Oh yeah, but I mean, to actually have one, brand new sealed in the box. But see, I don't need it sealed in the box because I'm going to play it.
Right. Well, you have the multi-card. You're going to have it on your shelf.
You're right.
I know the collector mentality. I used to be a collector too.
Yeah,
so I'm not anymore, and I'm glad of that because I get to play these on multi-cards, and I'm especially with this game. If I paid $100 for this game, I wouldn't cry. I'd scream. Yeah. I'd be like canceling that payment right away. I'd be like, oh, I'm sending this back. It's broken.
No refunds.
All right, so the last thing I think we really have to cover is the next game, which I don't know how much you guys played it. I didn't play it too much. I did take notes for it.
Hi, it's me, Chris, by night. For some reason, these clowns decided not to mention the title of the second game they played. It's a basic game called Haunted House. It's a text adventure, I think. No, it's not a text version of the Atari 2600 game called Haunted House. Nor is it a text version of the pinball table of the same name, although that would be interesting to try out if anyone were to attempt it. Anyway, I'll turn the microphone back over to the boys. Here you go.
They broil a banana, they boil a banana, they roast a banana, they toast a banana, they bake a banana. I tell you the truth, banana, what a crazy fruit.
Oops. Not those boys. Not Rusty Baker and the Banana Boys. I really got to stop editing until 4 in the morning. That's my own fault. No, the Bally Alley Astrocast boys. Adam, Michael, and Paul. You'll notice I've listed them in alphabetical order, because one does not want to mar those fragile showbiz egos.
So, Michael, how much did you end up playing this game?
I actually got out of the house. I escaped.
Oh, okay. Oh, cool. So you played all through the rooms. Cool.
No.
Oh, you know what?
Apparently, you don't need to.
Well, yeah, you don't have to play every room.
Let me ask you a question, though.
Oh, I did. I played every room.
Well, I got out in room 6. So what I got to know is all the different numbers. Do they mean anything, or is that just random?
The numbers? You mean like the item numbers?
Yeah, like
you mean when you get a message with a number?
Right.
That's a clue.
Oh, it is a clue.
Yeah, like that tells you which room the exit's in.
What? I never saw that. What do you...
Wait.
This game was released by New Image in 1981. It was released for Bally Basic in 81, and in 82 it was released for Astro Basic, and it was programmed, I think, like all the New Image games, by Don Gladden. It's an unusual game because it is made up of 9 different loads, and each of which is a separate basic program. This game must have been difficult to play from tape, but it's pretty easy to play from a separate digitally archived load. So thank you for doing that, Paul, because without that, this game would be a drag. So the manual is 10 pages. It's the first page contains a story and how to play the game, and the next 9 pages are actually the basic listing. So hopefully you didn't actually have to type this in yourself back in the day. It's shipped on tape, but I guess if there was an error, you could fix it that way.
Yeah, there'd be a lot of spoilers if you have to type it in.
Yeah, that's for sure. I guess that, yeah, no doubt, it's nothing but spoilers since this is... Oh, it's a text-only game. There's no graphics. Now, the tape itself it's a white tape, and it says New Image in a hand-drawn block. Haunted House is typed in a cursive script, and there's a small drawing of a ghost in the label. And as far as I know, there was no packaging for this game. It was probably just shipped in one of those little plastic cases like the other games by New Image. And I was trying to see if I could find like a description of the game from something, and I found a flyer for a New Image, and it's called New Image Presents. And it says, Tape SG1 Haunted House Adventure Game. Use 9 separate programs to play different results every game. Try to get out of the locked house by examining different items in the rooms. One player, keypad. So that's good. That's a good point. You don't use the joystick in this game either. You can't select it from the menu that way. So I'm actually going to read the manual. It's only like a page long. Actually, not even the manual. I'm going to read the instructions that appear on the screen when you play. And it probably says something about a page number, right, or some numbers that give you a hint, but somehow I don't remember. So here we go. Come on in! You have just entered the haunted house. To win the game, you must find a way to get out. The door has locked behind you. You may enter any of 8 rooms in the house. In the rooms, you will find the chance to examine 6 different items. One of the items in one of the rooms will lead you out. Also, at times, you will receive clues, which Adam didn't pay attention to. But you have to figure out what they mean. We're not telling. If you want to enter a new room, you must load a new program. There is a separate program for each room. When the computer asks you which item to examine, press 0 and follow instructions, which apparently I did not do because I didn't even pay attention to these clues things, which will bring up a good point like a little bit later. But anyway, all right. So yeah, that's okay. So explain to me. Well, what ends up happening when the game begins is you get a list. The first list is going to be the kitchen. You start off there, and there's a bowl of ghost toasties, a glass of clear liquid, a stove, a refrigerator, sleeping bag, and a package. Okay, now I want to ask you guys to tell me how you played this, because I obviously was not playing right if there's clues, because I didn't notice any clues.
Yeah, so, I mean, you kind of, if you look at the code, you kind of see how it's set up, but, like, you've got, like, I think you said 9 rooms and 6 items, and they actually program in 3 messages for every single item. Now, one message is going to be a win message. So, like, basically at the start of the game, it's just going to randomly select a room and an item that's the exit. And
every single item could be an exit? Like the bowl of ghost toasties could be an exit?
Yeah,
Really?
there's a win message for the bowl of ghost toasties.
Oh, really? Cool. That would suck. Wow, I won, and it took so long to load, and wow.
Huh, okay.
That would not be good.
I'm going to follow along, because around here somewhere I have the printout, and I have the printout right in front of me, so I'm still listening. Go ahead.
Yeah, so everything is going to have a win message. It's going to have, like, just a descriptive message that doesn't do anything, and then also every single item has a chance to get a clue message. So basically, it'll run some random number generator, and sometimes when you pick an item, it'll give you a clue, and it's going to give some message that will include a number. And the number...
like when you open the cabinet, like on level 8, I opened the cabinet and there were 4 doors. Is that
okay? So what that meant is that the exit was somewhere in room 4.
But you can't go backwards once you pass the room.
Yeah, you can go backwards.
I tried. Because once I got to room 8 and I hadn't found it because I skipped. Maybe it's because I skipped ahead because I was trying to cheat. Because I was pressed for time. I'm like, I'm not going to go through all 8 rooms. Because when I played this and I beat it for the high score club, I had to go through every single room, and I didn't. And it was actually the gorilla that let me out. So it was the very last thing because I picked. There's 8 rooms, and each room has 6 items. It was the gorilla, which is the last item in room 8. So I had to play and see a message for everything before I got out, and then the gorilla busted down a door or something.
I mean, there might be some sort of logic where it'll like kind of give you a break if you haven't found it. I didn't look at it that closely, but like there is a win message for everything. No, I thought you could. I mean, I guess I generally did go in order, but what would keep you from going backwards? Like if you hit 0, doesn't it just... If you hit 0 on room 8, it doesn't let you select something. What it does is it says, please make a selection. It asks you this. It says, what would you like to examine again if you hit 0 on room 8? Oh, well, now, yeah, I mean, I don't know if I specifically tried room 8. Like if you were in room 7 and you hit 0, would you be able to say,
maybe then you can go
6?
Backwards.
Go back to an older game.
Yeah.
Okay, so that might be a bug then, because... Like, I think you're intended to be able to skip around.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it wouldn't let me. And that's the Astro Basic version I was playing. I don't know, I haven't played the Bally Basic version. So that's all good stuff to know. So we've all escaped from the haunted house, though. Is that right?
Yeah. But, yeah, so there is a lot of text in this game, and, like, you would have to play it hundreds of times to see it all, probably.
So I actually wrote a little sample game, or not a sample game. I played a sample game and I wrote down the results so that listeners can understand how this game is played. I just played 2 rooms, and I'm not going to go through super specifics, but it's kind of hard to explain this game because I thought it was going to be like not a text adventure, but I thought it was going to be kind of like an adventure game that was driven with menus. That's the impression I had, but that's not what it is at all. It's basically just randomness. You pick an item, and either it lets you somehow get out of the room or it doesn't. Right? Is that kind of...
Well,
yeah.
It does kind of... See, I grew up with stuff like this as far as the text adventure games.
Mm-hmm.
So immediately seeing that load and seeing that you're in a kitchen, you see, I was like, oh my God! I felt like I was like 7 again. So that was cool. You know, I may or may not have mentioned this before, but my big exposure to really playing any kind of computer games was my uncle, who used to work for Raytheon, and he had the TRS-80 color computer, and they actually had like a game club for it. So they used to, buy the games on cartridge or disc, and then make copies, which apparently was allowed back then, and pass them around. So I was playing, knockoffs of Donkey Kong. I think it was called Donkey King. And one of the coolest things was, I think he had, I want to say CompuServe back then, the dial-up that you could play these text adventure games. You're in a dark cave and, you can see north, south, east, and west, which way do you want to go? And, you hit, okay, N for north. Okay, well, now you're deeper in the cave. And so I know what you mean. Like, it wasn't that in depth, but I still thought it was kind of cool.
Yeah, I think it is cool too. I think it's one of the reasons I like this game is because it's very different from the run-of-the-mill basic games.
Right.
It's like Paul said, it's heavy on the text, and there's no graphics whatsoever. It's just if you don't know how to read, you're not going to be able to play this game.
Yeah, there's not much gameplay to it, but it is pretty funny and definitely unique for the system.
Yeah. In fact, the instructions, they say something in fact, I have them in front of me. They say, the creator of this game assumes very little responsibility for the corny jokes in it. Which, there's some pretty bad jokes in there. So I'm going to run through my sample game here real quick. It's not too long, but the game starts with the phrase, haunted house, come on in. And it plays some slow music and low tones, which are probably meant to be a little spooky, but they're kind of corny and sort of actually. It reminds me of like a really old horror movie from the 40s or something like that. It then asks you if you want instructions, and you can skip them. I skipped them. So
there was your first mistake.
Yeah, I should. After load 1 starts, the game displays the kitchen, which I've already said what's in it, but since now I'm going to go through it once more. You see a bowl of ghost toasties, a glass of clear liquid, a stove, a refrigerator, a sleeping dog, and a package. And then it asks you, what would you like to examine? So I just examined things in order just for this example, and I examined the bowl of ghost toasties, and I got the message. You taste them and like them so much that you eat the whole bowl. Then I examined the glass of clear liquid, and it says it smells bad, so you pass. And the stove, it says it's on. You turn it off, and a devil yells from inside, "Turn it back on! I'm sleeping!" Whatever that means.
Well, because he likes it hot in there.
Oh!
Okay.
I did not. Okay, thank you, Paul. Thank you. That went right over my head. Right over my head. Okay. Now I examined the refrigerator, and it says, you open it, it smells like rotten eggs. You close it fast. I examined the sleeping dog, and it says it wakes up, looks at you, and disappears. Which I guess that would only happen in a haunted house. It's never happened with my dog. Examine the package, and it says you open it, a ghost comes out and gives you a big fat kiss. So this kind of, some of you guys might not have heard these messages, right? Because I guess if they're random, or how does that work?
Yeah, so most of the time that's what you'd hear, but like say the bowl of ghost toasties, for example, if you get lucky, you could get a clue, and the clue would have the form, there's a message in the bowl, it says number, and the number will actually be the room number that you need to go to get out.
Right.
And then if you get really lucky, then it's going to say, you see a prize from the box. It's a key. It fits the front door. You're out.
Nice.
Oh, Oh, that's cool. Pretty cool.
The one of the rooms had a set of keys, right, or a keychain, and it said like 6 Elm Street. When the game crashed and we had to restart it, then it changed to 5.
Oh,
so
okay.
It was the same, it was the same kind of clue, but now the room number changed. So I'm sitting there writing down, room number, whatever, 5. I'm thinking at the end it's some kind of crazy mathematical equation, and just ruined it telling me, no, that's the room that you got out of, dummy.
Well, that's interesting. So the next room I got into was the dining room, which is the second load, and that's got a bowl of dough, a keychain, like you said, a Big Mac, a cupboard, a pot of stew, and a garbage can. If you examine the bowl of dough, it says, it's so slimy you slick your hair down with it. The keychain says, they're skeleton keys. You try them on the door, but no luck. The Big Mac says, there's no pickles on it, so you don't eat it. So I don't quite get that one either. Can you explain that one to me, Paul?
I mean, I guess you just like pickles.
Personal preference. Right.
Yeah. Now, the next one is my favorite actual answer in the entire game. If you examine the cupboard, it says you open a door and a flock of bats flies out. And then you've got, it's randomly placed, it says flap, in like 12 different places on the screen. And it kind of makes a little noise. So I thought that was kind of cool. That's like the closest you get to animation in the game.
Yeah, they usually don't do anything like that.
Pot of stew, you don't know what kind of meat it is, so you pass. And then finally the garbage can. Inside is the mummy's old bandages. They don't smell too good. And I can continue, but basically I think that's good enough. It's interesting. And when I played this game during the High Score Club, I won by examining the gorilla, like I already said. And this game isn't what I expected. I thought it was going to be a menu-driven adventure game, but it's not. Maybe next month. I don't know if you guys are interested in this, because Michael was talking about games where you go north and south and east and west and all that. There's a game called Cavern Quest by Bruce Yeager, and it appeared in Creative Computing in 1983 in the July issue. And I typed it in back in like 2003 or something because it wasn't available. And it's actually not bad. It's I think it'd be neat to follow up this month and play that one. And that one you actually kind of have the map to get out.
Yeah, there's also a game, Hunt the Wumpus, which is a pretty common basic game that's kind of that style. And there's one that's I never got very far in it, but there's one called Treasures of Cathy by John
Collins?
John Collins, yes. Thank you.
The thing about the Treasures of Cathy is it's actually a graphical text adventure. It actually draws the screen and has data in it to draw simple objects on the screen. I think the first screen has a well, and then it says there's a well here. So it's very simple graphics, but it is a graphical text adventure.
But yeah, that's probably one, the most ambitious of that adventure style game I can think of on the system.
Yeah, and that was actually supposed to be part one of a trilogy or something, right? Which I think the other ones were released, but they're just not archived. Am I right?
I don't remember that.
So I have a couple of general comments about Haunted House, but before I get to them, I would like to see if there's anything else you guys want to talk about the gameplay-wise.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it is, I guess nowadays you'd call it a walking simulator, because, there's not just a whole lot of gameplay, you're just kind of going around and observing things, but, I thought it was pretty fun.
I've never heard that term before. What does that mean?
That's just a game where, it's not really, the idea isn't a challenge, it's just kind of observing a space, and Deer Esther as an example. They tend to be independent games, but, some people use that as a derisive term, because there's not a lot of, hardcore gameplay to it, but...
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a bad thing, just kind of a different style of game.
So I've got a couple comments. I think this is kind of neat. That all new image software was released as postcardware on August 2nd, 2001 by Don Gladden. He said, I usually call my stuff free stuff postcardware and ask the person who gets it to send me a postcard from their home area for my collection. It's interesting to see how my stuff gets around. So I guess it's not postcardware anymore because I think Don Gladden died a few years back. I can't remember.
I hadn't heard that.
Yeah. I guess my final thought on this, well, it's not my final thought, nearly my final thought. A lot of work went into this title, but it's really not much of a game. Haunted House is kind of a one-trick pony, but I'm not complaining about that. I think its point is to make you laugh a few times, and in that regard, the game is a success. This one is worth playing for its sheer oddness alone. It may even be unique, I'm not sure. I certainly can't think of any other game console of the Astrocade's era that had a game like this one. Can you?
Nothing quite like that.
Yeah.
I thought it was cool it had a Bally in one of the rooms.
Did it? I don't remember that.
Yes. There's a Bally. It's one of the choices is a Bally, and if you go, there's a bunch of green men playing it.
Really? Are you making this up? I don't remember that.
No, I'm not making it. Yes, I'm making this up. I think it's. I'm actually. I want to go play it again because it was just fun. You know, to like I said, it brought back cool memories.
Yeah.
You know, from being a kid. I would love it if they had other stuff like this.
So I think we're done talking about that. I just have one last thing to say, and that's the final standings of the High Score Club, which ended, and I posted on February 6th, and basically goes like this. The final round of this season's Astrocade High Score Club ended on February 6th, thanks to everyone who participated in the first season. That includes the two of you. It took me a little while to figure out the final tally, but I've managed, with a few caveats for possible duplicate names. See the next paragraph. Oh, I guess I don't need to say that. Next season, I'm going to try to keep a running total throughout the season. That will make it easier to do the final totals. I think that a few of the names may be duplicates, but no one said they were, so I don't think they actually are. We've got, let's see, I think there was like 15 people that actually played, 15 different people. For the first place, we've got me with 132 points. Next place, we've got Paul with second place. Yeah, it's Paul with 117 points. And I think this is you. Am I right, Michael? ND 2003 grad? Is that you?
What is it?
And what's your nickname on Atari Age?
Recently, it's now 128K games.
So did you not participate at all then? Am I crazy here?
I don't know if I was good enough to participate at all.
Oh my gosh.
I'm speechless.
Wait, Paul, you're back on the show. Michael, you're off the show.
Yeah, I figured as much. I meant to. I did I did like honorary mention.
Okay, well, for the next
honorary mention of a high score.
The next game I want to play for the next podcast is Solar Conqueror, and that's a current High Score Club game that's not going to end till like the 26th, I think. So you should play that. And, I mean, you kind of have to if we're going to review it, and so you might as well post some scores. Yeah. In fourth place we have Chris ++, who actually only played for like half the round, so he did pretty good. And then Roadrunner, and I'll just read the first 5 names, and then it drops off pretty quickly from there. But we had 15 people that participated, which isn't so bad since this is a pretty unknown system. Most people only played a couple of rounds, but they dropped in, and that was kind of fun. I played every round. I think, Paul, you played every round. And most other people, there's a few people that played about half to 2/3 of the rounds, I'd say. And then some people just played a couple.
Yeah.
So I just want to say my favorite game in the first season of the High Score Club was Cosmic Raiders. I think I'd even like that better than the Incredible Wizard right now, which is saying quite a bit since I really like the Incredible Wizard. And my favorite basic bonus game, which there's no surprise here because it's just my favorite basic game of all time, is The Pits, which is fast action, surprisingly addictive, and super, super simple. And probably tying with that is Outpost 19, which is a rather deep Astro Basic game.
Yeah, that's a good game.
Yeah. And by far, my least favorite main game this round was Blast Droids. That game could have been so much better. My least favorite basic bonus game was Brick in the Wall, which is a breakout game, but it's too slow. Or maybe Exeter's Revenge, which is by L&M Software, which is also too slow. It looks great, though. But that's not saying much. Saying a game looks great, if it doesn't have the gameplay to back it up, it's just not, So did you guys, you didn't really participate, Michael, but what was your favorite game to play last round?
Well, I did really like Cosmic Raiders. I don't know if it went up above Incredible Wizard for me or not. I guess, for a single-player game, I might like Cosmic Raiders, but I like Incredible Wizard for the co-op mode.
Okay, I agree with you there. I think Incredible Wizard, it does have an edge with the co-op mode.
Yeah, and I'm a fan of Avalanche for the basic games.
Yeah, that is a good one. That is surprisingly good. I was glad that you did the 300 baud version of it, and I was able to transfer it over to Astro Basic. So I don't know how many people actually played it, but it's playable. So that just, like I said, I guess we're pretty much done. Is there anything else we want to talk about, or is that about it?
I think that's good for me.
So, Michael, are you going to be able to play Solo Conqueror for the next one?
Yeah, not a problem. Solo Conqueror it is. I should probably also play Cosmic Raiders. I think I've only played it like once in my whole life.
What?
Yeah. I think by the time those games started to get released, I'd already gone over to the ColecoVision side. So I still had the computer system version. But the only Astrocade release game that I had was Incredible Wizard. I don't even know if the stores were still selling them by me at that point. I do remember getting, that whatever their catalog was. So I saw all these games. I remember when it had Conan. I remember where it had, G.I. Joe and also the stuff. I don't remember seeing Munchie. Wizard was definitely there, and I grabbed it as soon as I got it. But I don't want to say anything bad, but when you get a ColecoVision and start playing that.
So what I was going to say, Michael, about Solo Conqueror and Cosmic Raiders is that those were the last two games that were released by Astrocade, and I think they were released in pretty limited quantities, and definitely they were hard to find at the time.
Yeah, they were a little rare.
Yeah, they're the two rarest of the games for the system. The Incredible Wizard and those two games, I think, are the three standout titles for the Astrocade, and they actually, I think, are the only three games that are 8K games, besides third-party cartridges.
Gotcha.
So it makes a big difference. I mean, the other ones, the biggest ones besides that, they're 4K. So I mean, double the space, and let them put a lot more graphics in the games, especially sound effects. Like the sound effects on Solo Conqueror and Cosmic Raiders are fantastic. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll talk about that next month. Play some games, all right?
Will do.
Yeah.
Before we go into the two Arcadians, I'd meant to read this on the last episode because it was about the July issue of the Arcadian, and this is just a small classified ad that was printed in the Kilobaud magazine in the July 1979 issue, and it's for the Arcadian, and this is how some people, I guess, at least heard of the Arcadian, and I want to read it. It's real short. It says, Bally owners who subscribe to Arcadian know how to get 4 colors on the screen, do floating point arithmetic, and really get into making tiny basic jump by poking it in the right places. Annual subscription includes back issues. It's $5, and then it says he has Robert Fabris has his address there, so in San Jose, California. So I thought that was pretty cool. I wonder how many people found out about the Arcadian this way.
When was that from?
This was from July 1979. So this was, I don't think this is the first ad for the Arcadian in this.
Yeah.
But it might have been.
Yeah, I know there was one that was like mentioned in one of the early letters that we never actually found. It was some like really obscure newsletter. Yeah. But yeah, maybe that was the first one we've seen. I'm not sure.
Why don't we go over what you have, and if there's anything I want to cover, I'll get into it as we move along. How about that?
All right, so this is Arcadian Volume 1, Issue 9. It's dated August 18th, 1979. So, we start out like usual with a little news on the keyboard, specifically that it's still delayed.
Yeah, no surprise there, right?
Yeah. So, waiting on the FCC decision as usual.
Yeah.
And then he talks a little bit about the survey he'd asked in a previous issue. Bob asked, like, how much would people be willing to pay for an expansion keyboard? Would they be interested in kind of a homebrew one if they managed to develop one? So I know you actually put together some of the letters people sent back.
Yeah, there was a ton of them in the Arcadian collection. I think I put together 16 of them, which I was going through, and I'll probably glance through a couple of them, and maybe when we get to the reading letters, but I'm probably not going to read too much of them. All of the letters have already been added to Bally Alley. Maybe I'll just say what the letters are, who they're from or whatever, and when they were dated, and any interesting comments. Because there's some people sent some comments, especially some people who had 2 or 3 of their Astrocades die, and this is still the first year, So it's It's not. I'm not. The more I read stuff in the Arcade, or not just in the Arcadian, but in the letters, the more I am not surprised that the Astrocade just did a nosedive. And
it wasn't off to a strong start that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll probably get into some of the specifics in the letters, but it definitely seemed like there was certainly interest in it. Some people were a little hesitant with possibly paying $650, which who can blame them?
Yeah, and a lot of people didn't seem to really understand what he was talking about, because basically, to refresh some people's memories here, what we've got going on is in the last issue there was a survey that Bob put in there, and he basically was wondering, if Bally doesn't deliver on the ad under, what do we do? Do we try to make something ourselves? And he was wondering what people would be interested in having. And so people responded. At least dozens of people did. I don't know how many I actually was able to find, but and they gave their comments, and they also gave, what else did they give? They gave their serial number for their unit, how much they'd be willing to pay for a full capacity unit, and how much for just one that didn't have too much added memory and it didn't have Z-Grass. So basically 3 questions everyone answered.
Yeah, so Bob just kind of briefly mentioned some of the things people asked for, not surprisingly, some of them might not have been super practical. He mentioned wanting COBOL or Fortran, but that's getting a little technical, but those are languages that are compiled, so you have to run through a compiler and make an executable. It's not an interpreted language like BASIC that just kind of runs in real time. So if you don't have a disk drive or something, then it's kind of inconvenient, because you'd basically have to run a compiler and then save a program to tape before you ran it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's neat that eventually someone made an assembler which could compile, but I haven't ever used it. But you somehow got yourself up and tried it, and it took you a long time just to compile a short amount of code. So.
Yeah, I did actually go through the tapes from Dave Eibach and run his assembler. Yeah. So it's pretty tedious to use. I mean, I wonder how long it took him. I think he actually made Sneaky Snake on that, but that must have taken forever.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that to even use that assembler, I think it required an additional 4 or 8K or something like that. I'm pretty sure. What was that? Was it called the General Video Assembler?
General Video Assembler, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were going into a lot of details on the sound system, so that's something that Chuck Tomka really did a lot of research on, so that was really useful for people trying to, experimenting with what you could do with the music system.
Yeah, this is before people understood how to make music on the system, except for using print statements and then printing a letter, because every letter has a different frequency. And numbers too, and so that's how they were making music at first. And it's the music from the first year of the if you can call it music at all, is very primitive until people, and also it's only mono, so it's just one channel you could use in BASIC.
Yeah, it's a lot more complicated if you actually wanted to do the 3-channel music like George Moses did a lot of later on.
Yeah, it made a little easier in Astro Basic later when it was released in '81. There were actually some variables that were dedicated just to sound, but before that you had to do everything with pokes. Something I wanted to mention about, since we're speaking about sound, is that there's an American concert frequency chart, and it's prepared by someone named Robert Hood, and he basically takes the closest frequency that can be created on the Bally and compares it to what would be in tune. For instance, a standard A is 440 hertz, and the Bally can produce that frequency perfectly. But other notes can't be produced flawlessly on the Bally, but they can get pretty close. For instance, middle C is 261.6 hertz, which I think is an odd number, but I guess that's how it goes. And the Bally can only produce 262 hertz, which is pretty darn close, and I don't think I'd notice a difference.
Yeah, maybe if you have perfect pitch, you'll be like, this Astrocade music is totally out of tune.
Right, yeah.
Let's see, so Chuck talked a little bit about the registers and using the NT variable. So, yeah, that was one of those features that really wasn't very intuitive in BASIC, and I don't think necessarily you'd get all the information from the manual, so this was helpful for people trying to get all the power out of the language they could.
Yeah. The first manual for Bally Basic hardly has anything about music. There was actually an additional chapter added to the second manual that had how to make music, although it was music in 3 voices, and plus there was more programs and stuff in there.
Yeah. Let's see. So we've also got a tutorial on subroutines, so I think those are fairly simple.
I put some comments about that one. Bob explains how to use basic subroutines to replace oft-repeated code. He used a basic program sent to him by Brett Dabble and Vince Gazzoli. The program is a simple guess my number program. You know the type where the computer tells you to guess too high, you've guessed too high or low. And Bob shows the program as it was sent, and then he rewrites it in a simplified fashion using go-sub and return statements. And it makes his program shorter and easier to follow, actually.
Yeah. See, so have you played Black Box?
Not this version, actually. I have not played. I played one by there's the Black Box is by someone named B. Reaney. I don't know what the B stands for. I tried figuring it out, but I couldn't. But I did play one by Steve Walters that was available starting in 81 or something like that. Have you played this one?
Yeah, I'm sure it's been a while, but I played all of those back when I archived them.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of an interesting game. It was, originally a board game from Parker Brothers in the late 70s.
Yeah.
And, basically direct these rays to try to find hidden atoms.
I'm right here. You can't find me?
Yeah. I can hear you. I can't see you.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's described in the... if you call this a description of a sort of battleship game where the computer hides some atoms in a grid and you have to locate them, and then there's a little diagram that shows you how to play, and it's a pretty fun game. This was actually the Steve Walters version was actually converted by Richard Degler in 2010 to be a basic cart, so you could actually play it under MAME if anyone's interested in trying that out. And I think because of that, I think it's on Ken Lill's multi-cart, if I recall.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, which is really handy. Those the programs that were converted to basic to be basic carts. Speaking of Ken, I just talked to him the other day on the phone, and he said he went through and converted I want to say like 20 more programs to be basic carts, something like that. Huh. He's going to be making a new revision of them of the multi-cart. I'm not sure if he's going to be selling more, but he's at least going to have a new revision of the ROM.
Yeah, so you're going to upgrade.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool. What else you got?
So we've got some details about calling machine language subroutines from BASIC. So that's something that's eventually becomes really important for making the most ambitious BASIC games.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that's how they're able to make calls to the AK-ROM, which it's interesting that the way they do it is totally not the way you're supposed to do it. So it works on each individual version of the ROM, but like there's 3 different ROMs that came out for the Astrocade?
Yeah.
And 2 of them are pretty much all programs will work together, but the oldest one, the one that was the JSNA version, if you try to play any of the programs that use the system ROM routines, they don't work correctly. They usually screw up.
Yeah, I've actually run into that on some Wavemakers games, that the text gets all garbled.
Yeah, I don't have that issue, but I know that when we were playing the High Score Club, was it you that posted a score that was the score was garbled because was it? Yeah. So that's a good way to cheat. I mean, yeah. Yeah,
good way to keep you from knowing how pathetically low a score I got, maybe.
Right. It looks like it's just a 1, Paul. Is that just a 1? No, that's 1,000.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the rest is kind of getting into the ads. Do you have anything before that?
Well, there's the poking program, which you talked about. Video Concepts in Anchorage, Alaska is inviting people to send them programs that they... Let me get this right again. Video Concepts in Anchorage, Alaska are inviting software producers to contact them so that they can sell their products to their retail store, which I think is pretty crazy. First, that they're selling the Bally Astrocade in Alaska. I guess that's not too crazy. But there's someone actively inviting programmers to send them their software, which is interesting.
Yeah, that's not really something you saw a whole lot. People would put out advertisements to try to get people to buy their programs, but not so much to say, we want programs to sell.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's another little note here. Returned Bally units are available from V-Jupe for $200. These seem to be refurbished units, which he has gotten back into working order, which is another unusual thing you see. Later on, they start selling broken Bally unit motherboards for, I want to say, $5 or something like that, and people end up fixing them. But that I think that's right before Astrocade re-released the system.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, I've been talking to Michael Matt through emails, and I think I forwarded this to you, like one of his emails that talks about how he got three of those motherboards in like 85 or 86 that were broken from ABC Hobbycraft, but he was able to fix all three of them. So
cool.
That was a pretty good deal for him.
Yeah.
You have some comments on the classified ads?
Yeah. So we've got Dan Pierce advertising some programs, and that's actually the only ones he ever sold, Hammurabi and Star Blaster. So we haven't seen either of those, unfortunately. Although there are actually several versions of Hammurabi, which is, some sort of simulation game based on ancient Sumeria. So that seems to have been a pretty popular basic game at the time.
Yeah, it was available in, I think, the Big Book of Basic Games.
Yeah.
So people converted it. But Star Blaster, if nothing else, it's got a cool name. It's got the word star in it.
Yeah.
Let me maybe mention a couple of things about Seabreeze Computing. He has an ad in here too. So Seabreeze Computing is, there's just one programmer. His name is Timothy Hayes, and he lives in Monrovia, California, and he's selling 7 programs for between $2.50 and $8.95. I believe that this is the only time these programs are advertised. These programs include Down the Trench, math routines, which include they calculate the sine, cosine, arctangent, and square root, Munch, which I want to point out can't be a Pac-Man ripoff because Pac-Man's not even released yet, Submarine Minefield, Super Wumpus, and UFO Battle. And one last bloodthirsty highlight, and the reason I'm actually mentioning this ad at all, is a game called Hit the Pedestrian, which sounds a little bit like the 1976 arcade game Death Race by Exidy.
Yeah, I thought the same thing, actually.
Some of these programs are available in archived tape format, but a few, including Hit the Pedestrian, are only available as basic listings. And by 1980, so not very far from when there's at this time, Seabreeze Computing moved on to the Atari 8-bit platform for the 400 and 800, and some of these programs were actually converted for the 400, including Down the Trench and Submarine Minefield, which I think is kind of neat.
Yeah.
It's one of the few programs that came out for the Atari and for the Bally.
Now, Artillery Duel actually came out on Atari, didn't it?
Oh, yeah, I meant basic programs. In that case, it's very, very few.
Well, I mean, there's still not many, but that did remind me of that.
Yeah, Artillery Duel, yeah. Yeah, speaking of that, last month I uploaded, Chris and I playing a video of that. That was pretty fun to do. We played both versions, the basic version and the cartridge version.
Oh, cool.
And I guess one last thing I have for this newsletter is subscribers or reviews. Subscribers are requesting reviews, and Bob asks if anyone is willing to submit reviews of programs that have been advertised in the Arcadian. He's willing to get the seller and the reviewer in contact with one another. So is there anything else you want to cover? That's all I have for this newsletter.
Yeah, I'd also noted the program reviews, so it seems to be something that several people had requested, and so, you've got it now, but basically Bob isn't going to be doing the reviews himself, and it's only going to be something that the author submits. So basically your program only gets a review if you want a review of it. Yeah.
And there's reviews here and there that are kind of spotty, but not too many of them. But eventually, once the Astrocade gets re-released, a guy named Michael Process, he starts a column called the Game Player?
Yeah, I think that's right.
81 or 82. And he reviews, that column runs for maybe about 24 issues or something like that. Yeah, and they're all available on, I took them back in the early 2000s. I OCR'd them all, and Chris went through and proofread them. And they're all if you were to print it out, it's like 40 pages of just the reviews, which is quite a few of them. And reviews a lot of things that like cartridges, yeah, but a lot of basic programs that he ordered on tape, some of which still aren't archived in any format. So
yeah,
that's the only way we know about them, really.
Yeah, that and the ads.
Yeah, and the ads. Yeah.
Yeah, you got another tape by W&W. They're really cranking them out right now.
Yeah, they're very prolific.
Yeah, so I've got Subsearch by Mark Gladstein. So that's another one that we have a printout of, but I don't think we have on tape.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else on issue 9?
I don't. Before we talk about the next issue, I wanted to talk about when I was going through looking for letters, I found something that was kind of pertinent to this issue, which is something is called TV output notes, and it's basically, I'll just read what I wrote here. This additional information is pertinent to the August 1979 Arcadian, which I guess I just said, didn't I? The 4 pages of this document were created using the output of a short 10-line basic program. Whoever sent this document to Bob methodically noted down 4 sets of numbers for each ASCII character. I can't say that I quite understand the listed decimal number information, but it seems to nicely supplement the August 79 issue of the Arcadian's music coverage from Robert Hood, called American Concert Frequencies, and the second part of Chuck Tompkins' music tutorial, The Music Synthesizer. That's all I want to say about that, but that's available if anyone wants to check it out. And in fact, if someone checks it out, please explain to me what the hell it is, because I don't quite get it.
Yeah.
But he's got a list of a whole bunch of numbers, but then he's also got, like, he drew basically a keypad map of the, 24 keys, and, like, any combination you can hit on there, he's got a decimal number, which I don't know what it really means, but it has something to do with the note it plays, probably by doing the print command. So, which, as I said a little bit ago, doesn't give you great sounding music, but was what they were doing at the time. So next up is the Arcadian Volume 1, Number 10. This is the September 1979 issue, and it's 8 pages. And I'll let you do what you did last time, because that seemed to work out pretty well. I'll let you go through, and if I have anything to add, I'll do that.
All right. So we've got a little news about Ed Larkin. So he's done this project that would replace the keypad with the keyboard, except it sounds like he had a bit of trouble getting it to completely work because you actually still needed to push 2 keys to get a letter. Right.
Well, the Blue RAM keypad allows you to do that as well, but you can, and requires it actually for Blue RAM Basic, or excuse me, it doesn't require for Blue RAM Basic, but it requires it for Bally Basic or Astro Basic. You still have to press 2 keys.
Yeah, so I assume that's kind of because that's what that program is expecting as the input, whereas when they made Blue RAM Basic, or I guess it would have originally been Hot Rod Bally Basic it was based on, but they were planning on having keyboard support, so you could actually just type a letter and it would show up.
Yep. And similarly to other programming languages, like the Commodore lets you do this in BASIC, like on the Bally or in the Blue RAM BASIC, you can type shortcuts. So instead of typing all of print, you can type, I think it's just P and period.
Yeah.
Most of the keywords have shortcuts like that.
Yeah, and it's of course interesting to hear about Ed Larkin because he was part of the company that made the Viper expansion and was also almost managed to release the Seagrass expansion.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, the Viper, for anyone who's not aware, was a very large box, probably 2 feet long by maybe a foot deep and 6 or 8 inches high. That was just 16K of RAM, but it also allowed you to put in a couple of cards. And Ed made a keyboard card, so you could plug in a nice keyboard. A RAM expansion card, which lets you add more RAM to it. It was a very robust system. I used to have one, but it just, compared to the Blue RAM, which is only a little bit bigger than a cartridge, it was huge. But it was also expandable, which the Blue RAM was not.
Yeah. Although I kind of remember there being a lot of empty space inside that box, so I don't know why it ended up being quite that big.
Well, because it's the expansion slots, if you wanted to put a long card in there, just like on the original PC, I don't know if you remember, but the original PCs that were released in '81 by IBM, if you had a full-length PC board, it would take up the entire length of the PC, which is, I imagine, what would have happened if you had a full length, if there was a full-length card released for the Viper. But I'm sure he was thinking ahead,
Yeah, that does make sense. So yeah, that was say Alternative Engineering was the company that made those.
Oh, good point. I'm glad you said that. And I'd be curious if there's any listeners out there that have one of the Vipers besides Lance. I know Lance Squire has one. Something that's interesting to note is when I was saying I was talking to Michael Matt earlier, I thought he had a Viper, but he doesn't have a Viper. He just has a Viper case with his own RAM upgrade in it, which I think is kind of interesting. I should ask him where he got that case from.
Huh. Yeah, Bob talks about the keyboard memory unit that he'd mentioned on page 69 getting a little closer to development. So it's a little hard to keep track of all the different projects people have got going on with homebrew RAM expansions. But, this one sounds, pretty advanced. It would have 32K of memory, it would have its own operating system, so it's kind of almost like on the level of a Zgrass expansion, but I don't think whatever he was talking about here actually came out. Do you know who it was working on that one?
I don't. There's quite a few keyboard expansions that were sent into Bob that he sometimes mentioned in just a passing sentence. But there's not too many people that were working on RAM expansions like this one here. Something that this RAM expansion was going to be able to do is be compatible with the Jemenko JE610 keyboard. And I wouldn't note that except for that's the keyboard that's used with the Blue RAM expansion.
Okay.
Do you have the Blue RAM? So there's you don't have the keyboard for it though, huh?
No. Although I have the keyboard for the Viper.
You have the keyboard for the Viper, but no Viper unit?
No, I have a Viper unit.
Oh, I don't think there's any pictures of the keyboard unit online,
Oh, I'll have to check on that.
Well, there's pictures but they're from like the Arcadian, so like they're crummy black and white pictures.
Yeah, mine came from is the one that Bob Fabris had.
Yeah. Well, yeah, definitely take some pictures of that, because there aren't any online. Have you used it before?
Yeah, actually, it didn't work when I first got it, but then I think it was Lance's dad that actually helped fix it. I sent it to Lance.
Oh, I remember you talking to me about that, yeah. Yeah, when I sold my Viper to Lance, it got damaged in the mail, and his dad fixed it for him too. So yeah, but when I sold it to him, it was actually working. It's not like one of those things, Astrocade untested kind of things,
Yeah.
It's just something. I think we've mentioned this in the past, but since he mentions it here again, the model numbers for the 3 Bally units available in 1979 are the BPA 1000. Any serial numbers that start with that, with BPA 1000, are they were bought at Montgomery Ward's. Anything that started with BPA, by the way, BPA stands for Bally Professional Arcade. So if you got one that starts with BPA 1100, then it was from retail stores and TV stores. And if it was the BPA 1200, that's the JSNA version, which is maybe good to know for collectors.
Yeah, so then, that's what he asked about in that survey, along with the expansion details, I believe.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, and everyone actually sent his serial numbers in, which I think that's kind of interesting.
I checked, and there are keyboard pictures online, so...
Oh, there?
Yeah, so you there's so much stuff on the website, you don't even know what's on there, right?
It's true. It is true. I know that there's pictures from like a Polaroid. That's the only one I can think of, though, but I'll have to take a look. And it's only my website. Why should I know what's on it? So up on this initial page too, Bob had asked for people to do reviews, and he says that he's got some names and addresses of 5 people, so that people who write software can send their work to them for review. And reviews are planned to be printed in the Arcadian, and they'll cover categories such as level of challenge, originality, educational value, woohoo, and more.
Yeah, so we're getting into one of Dave Eibach's tutorials here. So he discusses using the text memory to store data. This is one of the ways you can play music. And I thought it was interesting. He gave an example of how you could do self-modifying code. So actually, I'm not sure there's any practical use for that in Bally Basic, but it is pretty impressive that you can do it.
Yeah, yeah. It's not an easy thing to do, though. I mean, it's quite in depth, this tutorial. I mean, it's short, but it's not something an average user, I think, would, like you said, there's not much call for it in Bally Basic.
Yeah.
But later on, not for self-modifying code, but this becomes a useful method to store machine language subroutines.
Oh, right.
People start using machine language, yeah.
And we also have a game by Dave Eibach, Space War.
Yeah.
Have you ever played that one?
I have played that one. It's not very good, but it's like the second player is like invisible or something.
Yeah, well, both players are invisible, so
Right, and you only see him when you fire or something like that.
Right, so...
I got this right? Yeah, okay.
So yeah, I actually thought that was kind of clever, because, it's basically kind of strategy of, like, you don't want to... Like, you need to fire if you want to hit the other player, but then as soon as you do that, you make yourself appear visible, so you got to kind of...
Yeah.
Like, fire and run, so you change your location.
Yeah. Dave ended up writing some pretty interesting programs. He wrote, Bugging BC? I think he wrote that.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty neat little program. And, he ended up, after he left the Astrocade, he went on, like everyone else did, really, to other more powerful platforms, and he went and started writing games for the PC, for DOS. And the three of them, I can't remember the names of them, but he told me about him when I did an email interview with him in the early 2000s. And so I found him on the internet, and I played him under DOSBox. And they're basically just Mario Brothers clones. So they're quite good, actually. They look really good, and they I want to say 88 or something like that. He wrote them, so they're pretty good for the time.
Yeah. I think I did that interview with him, and then he. If I'm remembering correctly, someone actually emailed me years later and wanted to interview him about those games. So I guess they at least had their fans.
Oh, that's neat. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So Bob makes some suggestions to readers who submit material, programs, and articles to the Arcadian. He wants program listings to be either typed or handwritten on the programming forms that are available from Chuck Tomka. Programs are reduced by 50 to 75%, so the handwriting must be legible. Explanations should be included. And I find this interesting since I know that programs would often include explanations, but Bob just didn't print them. He would, I think he did it so he could print more.
Yeah.
I've mentioned this before, but I think he should have printed some of them, because some of them were really interesting, but some of them are really long.
Yeah, space is at a premium, I guess, or you have to actually put it on paper.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like this issue I think is 8 pages, I think, so. Yeah,
the issues did tend to get longer later on.
Yeah, they did, yeah. Yeah, the very final issue is, I think, by far the longest, in 86. He basically just threw everything he had laying about, I think, and just threw it in there. It's I want to say 25, 30 pages or something like that. And so before we go on with the rest of the newsletter, I'm going to read something here because that was basically what we were just talking about was on page 80. And I have an extra page marked 80A. And this page is not part of the official September issue, but this information is an alternative to the add-on project and was sent to the people who responded to Bob's survey questions in the July issue. Richard Hauser was the person who replied, and he got this page from Bob. And since all the Arcadians online, or most of them, the first 6 volumes, are scans from my personal collection, I happen to have that page. And Richard, for convenience sake, I guess, marked the page as page 80A, which sort of makes sense. It sort of fits here. I mean, it really doesn't, but it fits well enough. It at least should belong with this issue. So this is basically what's included in it. This is what he talks about what they were thinking about including in this add-on, which never came out, but I think it's worth noting. It's going to have 32K of RAM, an RS-232 serial port, software selectable between 300 and 19.2 baud. And 19.2 baud is pretty darn fast. That's actually the speed of the disk drive, or the speed the disk drive, the Atari 800 system communicates with the computer. So they would have been pretty fast. It would have had parallel I/O with full handshaking, with dual 1200 baud Kansas City standard audio cassette tape with software motor control, which is interesting. Floppy disk interface, which nothing like that was ever available for the Bally ever. Expansion provisions, which is pretty vague. Keyboard, probably the JE610, which I already mentioned. ROM, which would include a simple machine language monitor, which may be on a cartridge, and with the ability to load and save to tape. and tape level indication, which is something that was actually included in the Astro Basic cartridge. And I wrote here, most of this did appear in one form or another in the Blue RAM unit, which shipped in June of 1980. That unit shipped with 4K of RAM, but eventually a 16K unit followed, and Ken Lill, when he took it over, he actually shipped just a few 32K units. It had a serial and parallel port, though they were non-standard interfaces. It provided 2000 baud format, a keyboard interface for the JE610 keyboard. What was lacking was the floppy disk controller and a machine language monitor. No disk drive ever shipped, as I said. No machine language monitor was available from Perkins Engineering, although they did provide expanded basic and utilities that made machine coding much easier. A machine language monitor called Machine Language Manager was released that could be used with a RAM expansion, and it was released in '82 by the Bit Fiddlers. And that actually could be used without a RAM expansion, but if you used it without RAM expansion, I think you only had like 140 bytes available or something like that.
Very, very short machine language program.
Yeah.
So we got a tutorial by Steve Walters. It's going over the PX function, it's a really convenient way to do collision detection, but one drawback he mentions is you can basically only use it for a one-player game because you're basically just checking one object at a time.
Next up, for like about a page and a half, there's and something I guess we haven't, I don't think we've ever mentioned before, is what Bob does on not everything but many like articles, and some of these, like for instance this PX article, the PX function article is 2 pages, but they're reduced by 50%, so they're all printed on one page sideways. So you get more content if you can. And then the next page, or I guess it's 3 pages worth, but they're reduced by 50%, is a dictionary by Steve Walpole, which provides a user with a conversion between some commands used in other basic languages and what is available in Bally Basic. Steve first gives the general command, a short statement about it, and how to do the same operation in Bally Basic, which would have been helpful back then.
Yeah, if you got one of those, books with 100 basic programs or something like that, then this could definitely help you out.
I mean, it gets pretty good examples too, so it's kind of not worth reading, I don't guess, but it would have been useful to users back then. Next, on the same page, but also printed at 50%, Bob includes a complete sample page from the 1978 Software and Hardware for the Bally Arcade, a technical description, which is also known as the Nutting Manual, with a handbook of hardware and software by Dave Nutting Associates. This is page 35 from that manual, and it covers a system subroutine called display time, and it's located in the AK-ROM. And Bob states that the page is probably only understandable to those who read assembly language, and he's correct. Bob's intent is to have the most interesting part of the manual transcribed into layman's terms for use by everyone, and also to have some programs developed utilizing these machine language routines, which really didn't happen. Later on, Andy Guevara of the Bit Fiddlers, who wrote the Machine Language Manager and other programs which we've talked about before, he had a column for about 5 issues which sort of talked about how to use this manual, which is how I learned to program in machine language on the Astrocade, because I wouldn't have understood how to use this manual without that tutorial, actually.
So we've got, as usual, some new programs advertised. So Don Daniels advertises the only programs he ever sold, which is Mastermind, Battleship, and Giotto Sensor. That was the first time I'd heard of Giotto, but it's like some sort of logic-based word-guessing game, so it sounds kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think it's the Commodore 64 manual that shipped with the machine actually had in one of the first programs you type in, actually from the manual, is Giotto. It's written by, I don't know how I remember the stuff. I think Jim Butterfield wrote it. If anyone who's familiar with the Commodore machine knows that stuff.
Yeah, so and it actually comes with 2 difficulty settings with 120 words each.
Yeah, that's, I mean, I expect that these programs are probably lost forever, unless, somehow, it's like these little tiny programs. I mean, they're not important really, except I think they are important in a certain respect that there was a time when there were amateur programmers, and for fun they programmed their machines, and which I think that's kind of lost now.
Yeah.
And I admire that people used to be able to pass their time instead of watching TV on a Friday night or whatever. They would ignore their wife, apparently, and and program.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's actually easier to program than it used to be. You know, you've got like things like Unity and Game Maker.
Oh, I agree with that, but I think it was I think the age of the amateur programmer is long gone. I think to program now it's easier. The tools are available. I mean, you don't even have to have an operating system anymore. You just use Linux. So it's all that stuff is available, and you can get a cheap computer free even and install Linux on it and go and start programming. But the number of people that program, I think, is a much smaller percentage than who used to program. You know what I mean? I'm thinking there's millions and millions of people who own computers now, and how many of those people actually program? You know what I mean?
Well, I think a smaller percentage of computer owners program.
Yes,
because,
that's exactly what I mean. Yeah.
But I think like the total number of programmers is probably higher.
Oh, much higher, much higher.
But yeah, I mean, computers are mass market now.
Right.
Yeah, so definitely a lot of programs like that I've never been able to find. Now there are some really obscure ones that I have found. So if you want a sampling of that amateur programming, then it's certainly available. But can't just pick a random program and necessarily expect it to be there.
Yeah. Well, something to make clear, I feel not everyone, but nearly all of the programs in the Arcadian they're the work of amateur programmers. Most of these people just did it as a hobby. I mean, some people won prizes like $100 for submitting a program, and I know that Bob, for some programs and articles, actually I don't know about programs, but for some articles, like the aforementioned programs I was talking about by Andy Guevara. I wish I could remember the name of his tutorial, but Bob actually paid him to write those. So I guess that's. I mean, if you get paid, you're a professional, right? Am I right? I think that's how it works. So, were you going to mention Steve Walpole's selling his programs too?
Yeah, Steve released quite a few programs. If you go through the big listing. Yeah. But yeah, none of the ones that he advertises here I was actually able to find. We've got Computer Craps, Slot Machine, Russian Roulette, Spell and Score, and Checkbook Balancer. Yeah, so $7 for all those programs. So yeah, I mean, I'd pay $7 for those.
All right, send it to me. I'll send you those programs. Yeah, one to note here is a Checkbook Balancer, just because it's an application, and there's very few of those written for the Astrocade. Most everyone uses it for games, and who can blame them, really? Yeah. It would have been very hard to balance a checkbook on that keypad with 1.8K of RAM and to save the tape, and it's crazy that it's attempted, but
Yeah, I'm not sure you'd actually save time doing that.
Right.
Unless you just want to prove that you can do it.
Yep.
Yeah. You can also buy the plans for Ed Larkin's keyboard, so only $10 and includes photos.
Yeah. I think that's part of the Astrocade collections somewhere, if I remember. It might be online, but there's so many I might be confusing it. There's so many plans for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we've also got another ad from Seabreeze Computing about their XY tutorial. So that has some kind of neat demos. So basically has some drawings with 3D perspective and that sort of thing. And here, tell me if you'd heard of this before, but they released their own joystick with some software that went along with it. So it says, hardware item, joystick controller, a true joystick, two 100K pots, 360-degree rotation with two RS-232 connectors, black plastic case, and 10 micro switches.
Man, that's a lot of buttons.
Yeah, this is a multi-controller device, comes with software on tape with listings and instructions on writing your own programs for it. $34.95, available October 22nd.
1979. Yeah. Well, that didn't come out, but a third-party controller did come out that seems very similar to this, because the one that was used for Brett Bilbrey's program, not Missile Attack, that's the ICBM Attack. That actually used something basically the same setup. It had two joystick connectors, which is all these RS-232 connectors are plugged into port 1 and port 2, and but it was only one controller. So yeah, that's how they were able to do it. So it's basically the same thing, but yeah, I had no idea that someone else, until I was going over this issue, I spied that too, and I was like, wow, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. So I'm curious if he ever sold any. Like, I tried to find more information on it in the collection. The only thing I found was this letter that Bob had written to Tim Hayes, and he said that he'd ordered one, but that was, it didn't really go into details, so I don't know if, if he got one. I don't remember seeing it in his collection.
Oh, that's such. Yeah, I didn't notice that. Would you do me a favor and if it's worth noting, send me tell me what that letter's called or whatever, because obviously I have it on my hard drive, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll add it to Bally Alley if it's worth putting up there.
Yeah, it might be worthwhile just so people can see what we're talking about.
Yeah. Since you brought up the XY tutorial, I wanted to mention that because I actually ended up using that in the fall. I was messing around with MAME, and I was trying to make grids for the screen, and I was having trouble because the XY, basically XY for, I guess I should explain this, XY is actually a variable. It's one variable, and it's set aside in Bally Basic. It's undocumented, which is why there has to be a tutorial about it, but it's the last place that the computer drew to or from or something like that. And you can use it to your advantage, so you can draw from one point to another, but just by using XY rather than having to put in a 5-digit location in memory.
Oh yeah, so kind of join a bunch of line segments basically.
Yeah, but so what I was trying to do, the XY, I was trying to figure out what those numbers were because I wanted to. I was basically making a map. I think I uploaded it, and you might have seen it, but it's so that you can take a screenshot of the screen under MAME and take this map that I made that shows every pixel location, and just you can just overlay it over the screenshot, and you can pick any pixel and you'll know exactly what area of RAM it is just by looking at it, which seems totally pointless probably unless you're actually trying to disassemble, which then it can be very, very useful. Yeah. And I've used it on a number of occasions to try to figure out what the heck's going on in memory and where it's looking, because it's not immediately obvious just where on the screen in memory a certain location is. So it makes it much easier to figure out what's going on in a program. Do you have anything else you want to mention there?
Yeah, we've got this very final note where Bob says he kept space open for a last-minute word on the add-on, but so he doesn't really have any word, but it does appear that the TI got some positive results from the FCC, but I guess it was just a little too late for for the keyboard.
Yeah, and as we know, it didn't ship, but it seems like maybe even at the time they thought they weren't going to, like Bob says, he says his sources are all down and think that chances are very slim that any level 3 hardware will actually be produced. Many dealers have given up the line, as have some distributors. Bob hopes to have some more definitive news in the next issue.
Yeah, so I guess it kind of got revived when Astrovision acquired them.
Yeah. It's skipping ahead for listeners, in case you don't know the history. Well, not many people, I guess, know the history of the system too well, but pretty soon, right around the corner, Bally gives up on the Astrocade, and by in early '80, I think it is, maybe mid '80. But so for a while, it's in limbo, and there's no more Astrocades available. And it isn't until Astrocade Inc. comes around, or Astrovision Inc.
Yeah, it was originally Astrovision and then renamed Astrocade.
Yeah, so it wasn't until they popped up in mid-'81 when they re-released the system. I can't remember the exact dates off the top of my head, but for almost a year, though, the Astrocade there was no, you could still find them, I guess, but they were not being stocked really easily, and it was impossible to find software, and people really, pretty much, I mean, there was no way to get anything except through the Arcadian. There was no information. The magazines weren't talking about them anymore during this time. So it's like a year dry spell. So the fact that the system came back at all, it's like a minor miracle.
Yeah, and I think it goes to show how impressive the hardware was, that it was actually, still competitive at that point.
Yeah. I was playing, today I was playing Solar Conqueror, and because that's the high score club of this game. And if you guys are listening and that round is still going on, which it probably will be over by the time you hear this, but I've decided today it's one of my favorite games for the Astrocade. It's always been among my favorites, but I've played quite a few rounds of it. Not very good, but it's one of the better looking games, and it's pretty fun. And track it down if you don't have it. I'm going to probably read a few things because I'm not going to. What I plan to do is talk a little bit more, but there's just too many letters. There's just too many.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to do that. But there's some highlights that I highlighted here that I want to talk about. So this first one I want to talk about is, and some of these, by the way, when I'm talking about letters, these letters are, Bob actually requested not letters, but he requested postcards. So quite a few of these responses were written on postcards, and people wrote really tiny if they had something in addition to say. So it was kind of hard to read some of them, but and some of them did write letters, but for the most part, people responded. And I guess something I've never seen these before at the post office, but the post office used to sell a generic postcard that had no picture on it or anything, and it was pre-stamped with the amount that was of however much it cost to send a postcard at the time. And it was just basically a piece of cardboard, and you just write down a few notes and send it off to whoever you were sending something to, which seems like a really generic postcard to me, but I guess it would work perfect for this instance, which is what some people used. So the first one, though, that a fellow named Paul Zibitz wrote sometime in '79, so probably July or August in response. I'm not going to say everything, but I'm going to say, he says, I've had a few minor problems with my unit, but they are being taken care of. Sometimes the color cuts out, leaving a black and white screen. If you push in the cartridge pretty hard, the color pops in again. It's been a nuisance at times, but I can live with it for now. If it gets worse, or it won't go back to color, then I'll get it taken care of. My other problem seems related to my interface. While using the programming cartridge, sometimes the program will freeze on the screen with nothing functioning. If I pulled out the RS-232 connector in hand controller socket number 3, which is where the 300 baud interface goes, it'll function again, but you can't use the interface. At other times, the interface would work fine. I think that there must be some sort of short in the connector. Yeah, so that's, everyone was always having problems. I guess people don't really write and say, well, my unit's working perfectly, so you only really hear about the problems, What's that saying?
Yeah, good point.
The greasy, the squeaky wheel gets the grease? Something like that.
Squeaky wheel gets grease, yeah.
Kirk Gregg, also in response, he writes something. He says, I bought the Bally with the idea of expansion to a full micro later, with ZGrass or graphics. It would be better than the Apple, the PET, the TRS-80, and the OSI, which I don't even know what the OSI is. Bally should finish the system as planned. It could be one of the best. If a third-party keyboard is forced by Bally, I'll just not read that part. But, yeah. So he's excited. Then we have someone named Levin. I don't know if that's their first name, last name. Says, I'm very interested in the events pertaining to the development of an add-on keyboard or memory device. I can understand Bally's view, but more computer memory is needed now. The keyboard can be easily tolerated. Shortage of memory hurts. Bally's unit at $650, if well designed and very state-of-the-artish. Even a partial unit at $350 would be welcome in the marketplace. The Bally offerings are attractive because you have a company matchup of components. I would not, however, rule out the possibility of bypassing Bally's unit for one of the described by a third-party add-on. And this guy goes on, he actually asks for basically kind of reviews. Let's see. Someone named M. Lekowitsky wrote a letter or a note on August 2nd, 1979, but he just asked if anyone plans to make a voice synthesizer for the system, which I just thought that was worth noting since someone actually bothered to ask that question. So this person says, Richard Bates wrote on August 4th, 1979, he says, I would like to be able to handle larger numbers. Output is an important item for me also. I really know very little about what I can do with this computer. Most of the books and articles I can get a hold of are far too technical for me to understand. Which, the Arcadian did a pretty good point, I think, helping people out to get started programming.
Yeah, definitely.
Terry Kursky on August 10th wrote, ZGrass is something I just can't pass up. I've done a lot of shopping for the computer for me, and I've done a lot of thinking as for which expansion units I prefer for what I need to do. I think I made the right choice. I have experience in making a choice between the TI and HP calculators, and I chose HP for what I need. Now I choose ZGrass for my expansion needs. I still would like to know what specs you have on your expansion system. So there's someone who says, I need ZGrass now!
Yeah, I hope he didn't wait too long.
Right? He's still out there waiting.
Yeah.
John Hurst wrote on August 11th, what is the possibility of increased resolution? 16,000 points just isn't enough compared to Texas Instruments' new computer, the TI 99.4, and some of the other ones on the market. What about more colors? So, yeah, you're not going to get more colors. Although, in a way, someone did upgrade it. The UV1 system did give you a quadruple resolution. So that sort of happens, sort of, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think you'd have been able to get more resolution without actually replacing all those custom chips, would you?
Well, you don't have to replace the custom chips, but you do have to change the motherboard. It's not trivial. I mean, not trivial whatsoever. You need to keep the custom chips, actually, because
those were used in the arcade hardware.
Yeah, and you have to add another 12K memory because the arcade, even the lowest version of it, only because the screen RAM becomes 16K instead of 4K.
Oh, right.
Let's see, someone named Kelvin Locke on August 19th wrote, please keep up your excellent work in the Arcadian. It is the one thing that has kept me from being totally discouraged with the endless delays Bally has on the expansion unit. It obviously was a great disappointment to learn the price would increase from $400 to $650, and it will probably go higher before it goes on sale. My main future interest is the expansion unit would be for business accounting and financial analysis programming, real estate in particular. In the meantime, I would really appreciate seeing some business programs in the Arcadian. Well, he did not get that wish.
I wonder if he ordered checkbook balancer.
Maybe he did. That's funny. L. Kingman wrote on August 24th, 1979, which was my 7th birthday, by the way. To me, the present keypad is adequate. The other capabilities of the third-party keyboard are desirable. My machine is crashing. Bally sent me a service manual and hacker's manual. The problem seems to be in one of the custom chips, so back to the factory it goes for repair. And I have a comment about that. I can't believe that Bally sent an end user a service manual and the hacker's manual so that they can fix their unit themselves. Don't you think it's kind of weird?
Yeah.
Screw you. Then there's someone named Chris Schmidt who wrote on August 28th that he bought a Tidewater computer. He's a member of the Tidewater Computer Club, and he's trying to interface the Bally with a PrintTech 100 printer that he got for a pretty good price, which eventually a lot of people end up using the 300 baud interface because it's basically gives you a serial port if you add a little hack to it, and they were able to use printers using that interface. And they basically just pretended they were sending their output to the tape player, but really it was going to a serial printer.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty clever little hack. Ken Statler on September 3rd wrote, this happens to be my third unit since February of 1978 because the other units failed to operate right after just a couple of months of use. My present unit is now clearing the memory and doing very aggravating things.
Oh, no.
I have written to Bally concerning the problems and I'm awaiting a reply from them. So he's going to be getting a 4th unit soon.
Yeah.
That's just crazy. That's called a lemon, I would say, right?
Yeah.
David Templeton on September 5th wrote, I enjoy the Arcadian very much and I find it very useful. I appreciate the effort you put into it and the contributions made by others. And it's kind of good to hear that people actually were getting use out of the newsletter. I'm glad that they didn't all complain and say, my poor Bally's dying.
Yeah, I mean, it actually wasn't the case with people writing to Bob that they were just complaining.
Yeah.
A lot of people were really appreciative.
Yep.
So it's a pretty good community.
Yeah. Al Newark on September 6th, 79 wrote, if Bally does not come out with a keyboard, I would want the replacement to be able to handle Bally graphics, color, and sound, as I feel their system is superior to anything else available. The computer magazines all seem to have ads for available software to be used on the TRS-80, the PET, the Apple, etc. I would like the keyboard unit to be compatible with one of these systems. The one with the best graphics and color, please, so that I'm able to buy and use available software directly. It's pretty interesting that he wants a compatible system already at this time.
Yeah, Astrocade compatible.
Right. And I think this is the last one from the people who replied. George Tucker on October 16th wrote, other than the loss of the ZGrass feature, I would like your plans for the expansion. I like it better than the Bally's. I called I called Bally recently to ask them about the expansion unit and came away pretty discouraged. You asked whether anyone is interested in the lists of routine descriptions and object code described on page 83. And George is referring to the nutting manual here. Please let me know how I can get a copy. I had no trouble understanding the sample display time and only wish that you had given me the address of the routine so that I could use it. And then George provides a short basic program that can be used to give the gunshot sound effect that's built into the Bally basic ROM. Or not the Bally basic ROM, into the Bally 8K ROM.
Yeah.
So those are the 16 letters. And I'm not going to read anything else from them, but they're all available on Bally Alley, along with my complete notes that I took on them. And some of them are interesting because most people provide their serial number. Some of them are really low, like 3,000. So they're obviously from JSNA. These are the people who are probably having the units overheat, you know?
Yeah, definitely some interest in the keyboard at this point. Although, I suppose that if you're looking at the audience of people who write into the Arcadian about it, you're probably not getting a representative sample.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I thought of that. But you're still getting a sample of people who thought that way in 1979, you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
So we've got a letter here from Chuck Tomka from about 1979, and it's actually 2 letters. He includes a program called Learning Aid for the AND commands, which he wrote in January of 1979. I imagine that this letter was written around that time too. He sent 2 programs, a modified player piano. It's a single-page modification to the existing Bally program, which allows easy and quick changes to the commands that'll let you talk to the sound ports in the Bally, which you can't normally do. So, and Chuck Tomka, just as a reminder, he in the July and August issues of the Arcadian, he wrote a music subroutine, or not a subroutine.
Tutorial?
Yeah, tutorial. That's the word I'm looking for. He wrote a tutorial on how to use these routines. So it seems that these are the 2 programs that he used to help figure out how to write that. So that's kind of neat. He writes, he also, I'm including this because I would like a listener to listen closely because I want to know what the hell this guy's talking about here. He includes a forum on which he wrote his 2 basic programs, and it's something that he created on a machine that he works with at Xerox. He says, I'm sending you some blanks so you can try them if you wish, which a lot of people ended up using these. And I didn't realize that Chuck Tomka wrote them, but when I look really closely, it actually has his name on every single one of those pages. So it's kind of neat. But let me read here some more. I'm pretty sure that these basic forums made their way around the Bally arcade community. I've seen quite a few of them used in the Bob Fabris collection. I had thought that they were generic forums created for any computer that used BASIC, but it seems that Chuck made them. And he describes the printer that he uses to create the forums. He says, it actually doesn't take too long to create a forum on what I use, which is a cross between a computer and a very high-speed line printer. It puts images on paper with laser optics utilizing Xerox Zero graphics. It's really quite an impressive machine. As an example of what can be done with it, well, if you can envision an 8.5 by 11-inch blank sheet of paper and another 8.5-inch by 11 completely black sheet of paper, this represents the extremes of the machine. Everything between, just about, can be done by this machine. That includes all different font sizes, styles, logos, lines, and even signatures. All this with about the resolution of 300 dots per inch. The speed of this machine is 2 full pages a second. If you wanted to print with a reduced print style and also have put 2 sides of data on the same side of the paper, this machine would print an equivalent of 36,000 lines per minute. Like I said, a very high-speed line printer. But what I think he's actually describing is a laser printer, because Xerox had that technology at that time, and it obviously wasn't used outside of Xerox, but I don't think anyway. But they started developing it in like 75 or 76, so it sort of seems like what he's describing, don't you think?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, it sounds kind of computerized too, almost. Like,
yeah.
I mean, nowadays if you get a big industrial printer, they almost all have a CPU in them. But at that point, I think that would have been pretty unusual.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Xerox was a really innovative company at that point. It's a kind of a famous story about Apple, visiting their research lab and kind of using some of their ideas to make their own computers.
Yeah, the Apple Lisa, I think, is eventually what they came up with. Steve Jobs went and saw it, supposedly, something like that. But they made a ton of things. There's actually book. I think it's called Dealers of Lightning, and it's about Xerox PARC. And if you ever get a chance to read it, you should. It's worth it. It's a worthy read. Written not written back then, but it's about this time period in the 70s, and how like all that technology Xerox PARC just squandered away. They didn't really use it, and other people caught up with them and surpassed them, I guess.
Yeah.
So you have something to say about the second letter, so why don't you start on that one? That's the one by Tracy Crook.
All right. Like many people, Tracy is working on a RAM expansion, and I was actually curious if this is the same one that Bob had mentioned in issues 9 and 10 that we just talked about, but yeah, I couldn't really tell for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, what Tracy mentioned is that the hardware works well, but it's going to take some more work on the software. So I was wondering if that was what the newsletter was talking about with having an operating system for the RAM expansion, because of course I guess Zgrass would have had its own operating system.
Yeah. And I think the Zgrass unit was supposed to have 2 disk drives, so you would have also had a DOS of some sort as well.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and another interesting note from the letter is about how once you had extra RAM, you would be able to load in a cartridge from tape.
Right.
So
Yep.
and that was actually something that people did do with the Blue RAM eventually.
Yeah.
And kind of gave me the thought of, I wonder if that's one of the things Bally thought about when deciding about if they wanted to release their expansion, because it would have made piracy a lot easier.
Yeah. I noticed your comment. I don't think they would have given that a thought, because the amount of penetration of RAM expansions into that market would have, although I guess if they had released a Zgrass.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, if they released their own RAM expansion, then presumably a lot more people would have it.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, that's a good point. I'm guessing no, but it's very, I mean, they had so many other issues. That was the least of their concerns was piracy. Yeah. I mean, they, they had to make units that would actually function, like, at least reliably, 90, 80% of the time at least. That would have been nice.
Yeah. True enough.
Yeah. I do want to mention something that Tracy says here. He or she says, haven't done much on it lately, meaning his Bally, as my Bally was struck by lightning about 5 weeks ago. I think he meant like maybe a telephone pole was struck by lightning and it killed his unit.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully not directly struck by lightning.
I was holding it above my head when it was raining to protect me from the rain, and bam!
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess at least you can't blame JSNA on that one.
Right. So the next one I have here is from Ed Mulholland. This is from July 23rd, 1979. This letter is made up of 2 letters, actually. The first is dated July 1st. The second is dated July 23rd, but I think they're sent at the same time. In the July 1st letter, Ed says, the schematics to our Ballys shows a 10-pin and a 26-pin port in addition to the IEEE 488 port. And this is what got me intrigued, because I was like, what is he talking about? Right? So I looked up the IEEE 488 port is a 26-pin port developed by HP and used most frequently, it seems, on their test equipment. However, it was also used on the Commodore PET. I presume that Ed is misnaming the port and is actually referring to the 26-pin connector, not the 50-pin connector. And he continues, my machine did not have this 26-pin port as shown in the photo on page 14 of the Bally PA1 service manual. This would still be only a small inconvenience because the pin numbers and functions are as shown on the schematic. And he's partially correct. The photo on the Bally arcade motherboard, as shown in the service manual, does have the connector. I took a look at my own Astrocade unit, as manufactured by Astrovision in '81, and it too does not have this port. So at some point, I don't know if all the Ballys have this extra port that's like not accessible from the outside of the machine, or if it just was removed and it's only in a picture in the service manual or not. Do you know anything about that?
I'm not quite sure what... Now, is this something different from the port you plug a RAM expansion into?
Yeah, that's the 50-pin port on the back. Yeah, there's... So basically on the side, kind of, it's on the top. If you're looking at your Bally unit, it'd be on the right-hand side all the way to the back. In the picture in the service manual, there's basically an edge connector. It's got 13 pins on the top and 13 pins on the bottom. And it's definitely not on my unit. but it's easy to spot, as clear as day on the unit that's in the service manual, and I've never even noticed it. And maybe the early Bally's had it. I don't know. If anyone knows, let us know. It's interesting.
Well, I've got an early Bally here, so where do you want me to look at?
Oh, do you have it open?
Oh no, it's not open. Is this something you have to take the case off to see?
Yeah, you definitely do.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's hidden inside the case. You can't. There was no way to get to it from the outside. So maybe it was used for testing purposes on the assembly line or something. I don't know. But I think it's interesting that there's definitely some units possibly that have this additional 6 or 26 pin connector on it. So yeah, that's all I had to say about that letter. I just thought that was noteworthy. I guess there's one other thing. The second part of the letter, he kind of explains how he put his own ASCII keyboard in parallel with a 24-key keypad so that he could use it that way. But, I think that was described in the Arcadian later issue, or at least mentioned briefly. So the next one I'll let you cover because this one by Robert Dahl is next in line, and you have the notes for it.
So there's a letter from July 29th, 1979, and one thing I noted here was that, we always make fun of all the slot machine programs on the Astrocade, so I kind of wonder who actually plays those, and it turns out Robert is a fan of slot machine programs. He's actually typed in Ernie Sam's program, and he's also ordered one from an ad in the Arcadian. And I tried to see if I could figure out which one he'd ordered, but actually even at this point there had already been a slot machine program released by David Stocker, W&W Software, and Scott Waldinger. So probably one of those three. I don't really know.
That's funny.
Yeah. So, but Robert actually has some critiques of the slot machine implementation. He wants more realistic odds, better graphics, and variable payouts.
That's funny. Because you're not getting real money, so but I guess this is like going to be a continuing odyssey. Looking forward, maybe we can see if we can spot a new slot machine program for the next few issues at least.
Yeah, maybe he would have enjoyed Wavemaker's slot machine program, because they eventually released one that had some pretty good graphics.
Yeah, that was just in the next year, in 1980. Yeah, it's actually a pretty good one. Maybe we'll have a special edition of the podcast that's just dedicated to slot machine programs. All right?
We could.
The 16 different slot machine programs you too can play in the Bally Astrocast.
Yeah, maybe we could do a tournament. Every episode we pit two against each other.
Right. What's got the biggest payout? I've lost my place. Robert Dahl notes that he was able to order the Amazing Maze and Tic-Tac-Toe cartridge from Montgomery Ward's catalog. He got the cartridge in just 3 days. He adds that a fellow who sells the arcade and its accessories tells him that he has a standing order for all arcade items, but gets more promises than anything else from a wholesale distributor in Milwaukee. This man had been trying to get the Amazing Maze cartridge ever since the first time that he heard about it, and he had no luck. He figures that Bally's distribution must be way out of whack. He also says, this is about the slot machine, and finally he says he's got a comment on the checkers program that was printed at some point, because it's got him puzzled. He expected to see a regular checkerboard on the TV screen. He says that right now it's beginning to soak in that I should take a checkerboard and number the squares and move the pieces around as the numbers on the screen direct. Is this accurate? In a letter from Andy Guevara of the Bit Fiddlers, written on July 30th, 1979, it says, Andy Guevara wrote several programs that were published in the Arcadian and Cursor Basic Express newsletters. Andy programmed the Machine Language Manager, a 2K cartridge that was released in 1982 by the Bit Fiddlers. He released a few tapes, including Candyman and Chicken, 2 games released on tape that were written in mostly machine language. He wrote Ms. Candyman and Sea Devil, both of which are 4K cartridges that are released or that were released in 1983 by L&M Software. Mr. Guevara also wrote The Bit Fiddler's Corner. That's the name of that tutorial. It was an Astrocade machine language programming tutorial that ran as a series of serialized articles in the Arcadian newsletter in 1983 and 1984. Andy just received his first stack of Arcadian newsletters, and he has had his Bally Arcade for 5 months and never dreamed that so much information could be further developed. And he has dumped the baseball cartridge and is pleased to see that other people make ROM dumps too, which I find pretty interesting that, he was doing that. I mean, in some ways, like, the Bally could be used so much as a computer that people were doing very unusual things with it, I think. Yeah. He's looking into expanding his internal memory from 4 to 12K of RAM with a single IC designed by Harris Semiconductor, which would be pretty cool. What else? Andy has come up with a solution for Bob to be able to print programs. He provides details and a schematic on a device that can be used that will be giving a UART to allow the Bally to print. And although Andy has only had his Bally Professional for 5 months, the innards have already been changed twice. So there's another person who's got a screwed up Astrocade. Let's see.
Andy definitely went on to do some great things for the system, so I guess this is probably the first we've heard from him.
Yeah, I've actually tried to track that guy down. If he's around, I can't do it. I just can't find him. But then again, I mean, it's the last time I had a current quote address would have been in the early 80s, so I don't know. Yes, he could be anywhere, and his name is much more common than I expected it to be too. Next up, we have a letter by Richard Darmody. It's written July 31st. Richard's interest has been piqued by the announcement of the keyboard project, so much so that he has already gone out and bought a keyboard for the project. He says, "The glimmer of the future for the arcade as a computer has prompted me to retain this arcade with hopes for the future." He notes that while he understands the difficulty that Bally may be having with the FCC, he has noticed that other companies, such as Apple, have made significant progress in the same time period since the arcade was first announced. That's true, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Richard is on his second Bally arcade. He has had to return his first one to Montgomery Ward as it, quote, "it tended to self-destruct after being in operation for a while." He hopes that reviews of the Bally cartridges will be in future issues. There's no local retailer for these items where he lives, so his only resort is the mail order. He would like to have some idea of what he is ordering before he places an order. So the next one is by Guy Miclemore, and since you cover that one, why don't you give this one a go?
All right, so this letter is from July 31st, 1979, and of course Guy worked at ABC Hobbycraft, which was a pretty big supplier of Astrocade hardware and software. So one thing I found interesting was that Guy said that he was pleased with how many copies of the fantasy game tape he'd sold.
Yeah.
He thought of that as a pretty specialized thing because, it's basically, like, it's not really a game. It's kind of aimed at tabletop role-playing gamers.
Yep, D&D and such.
Yep.
In fact, it was called Dungeons and Dragons eventually, wasn't it? Or was it? Oh no, that was by someone else.
Yeah, I think Rich Teachins did the other D&D tape.
Yep.
But yeah, this was the first of that small genre of program.
Yeah, the genre of two.
Yeah. Yeah. So I didn't. I wish he'd actually said how many he sold, but he didn't actually give the number. But yeah, like, you never really know how many tapes people sell when they put out an ad in the Arcadian, but in this case, he was, pretty pleased with the results he got.
Yeah.
So he said he had some plans to release some more tapes as part of Skyrocket Software with another programmer named Greg Poline.
Mm-hmm.
But surprisingly, I didn't see any indication that actually happened.
Right.
So it seems like that the fantasy game tape was the only one that Guy ever sold. So I wonder why he didn't end up making more, since he felt like he was pretty pleased with the results of that one.
Yeah. I think he does write some other things, doesn't he? But maybe he doesn't sell them on tape or something. Yeah.
I mean, there's a few programs like in the newsletter, but I'm referring to specifically selling software.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's also interesting that people, when they would sell their software, I mean, they didn't just sell it on tape. Some people sold their software just like, so you'd still have to type the damn thing in. So like you'd buy a listing and it would be $2 or something, which is great, except you still have to type it in.
Yeah, you know? Yeah, I think I'd have just paid for the tape myself.
Right. I have a couple of things to add about this letter, too. I think it's interesting that Ken Ballard, the owner of ABC Hobbycraft, has commissioned a professional hardware-software man to develop a 64K keyboard memory expansion to be sold commercially for the Bally. The unit is still in the planning stages, but they hope that it will be ready by December. This seems overly optimistic since it is already August.
Yeah.
I don't recall ever hearing about this either, so that's kind of weird.
Yeah, I don't really know what happened with that, and it's also weird that it's a 64K expansion, because like that's, if I recall correctly, actually the entire memory space that it can access.
Yeah, it is.
So if you had 64K of memory, then like that would be taking up things like the cartridge space.
Right, it would take up the 8K of cartridge space and the 8K of ROM space that's set aside for the operating system.
Yeah, so it's hard to imagine that you'd actually use quite that much memory.
Yeah. Although there is the 64K RAM board that was released, but it had bank switching available on it, I think through dip switches or something. So you could actually, those extra banks you could actually load from tape. You could load like your own operating system into the 8K, but you use dip switches to locate it. I know Mike White, because it's kind of explaining to me, I've seen its unit, but I don't have any experience with using a system like that.
Yeah, so when you got that one, I think you basically decided how much memory you wanted to install in it. So
yeah, it came unpopulated actually. Yeah, that's true. Guy says that he really enjoyed Chuck Tomka's synthesizer tutorial. He found that the two accompanying programs were very useful. He does wonder how Bell Telephone feels about the programs, however, because he notes that if you add the buttons A through D to the touchtone dialer program, called Touchtone Simulate, then you have a semi-efficient black box for receiving free telephone calls. The touchtone dialer doesn't work in Guy's local area, however. He thinks that Indiana Bell has an acoustical filter that prevents touchtone signals from being input into the microphone from the handset, which is interesting that they would even do that.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, so Guy also said that he was selling tapes by W&W Software and by David Stalker. Mm-hmm. So we talked about some of their programs earlier.
Yeah. Dave Stalker, it was interesting when he responded to, I think we talked about this last time, but he was a member of the Yahoo group. So I posted it and he's like, wow, I haven't seen those programs since 1979. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
So Guy also makes an observation that the tape quality for software that is being sold through the Arcadian's classifieds ads, it seems to him that the people distributing their software on tape are using cheap tape brands, which makes loading the tapes difficult. He notes that Dave Stalker software is also available on microcassettes, which is the first time I've ever heard of this. And have you ever heard of other programs being available on microcassette?
I don't remember any being sold on microcassette. I know someone actually sent me some microcassettes one time that just someone had like typed in programs from the newsletter.
Yeah, really?
Yeah, it was actually like I didn't get very good sound quality off of them, but I basically figured out there was nothing unique on there.
Yeah, those were pretty handy to have around. I remember when Chris and we went to the World of Atari '98. Which ended up becoming the next year being renamed the Classic Gaming Expo out in Las Vegas. We used one of those little recorders to tape all the guest speakers talking, and it worked pretty well. I mean, surprisingly well for how cheap those little things was. We just set it on a chair beside us or on our lap, and then Chris took them all and he transcribed them, and we put them in the Orphan Computers and Game Systems newsletter in like August of '98, I guess.
Well, you need to put up an MP3 then.
We didn't keep the tapes. Yeah, it's too bad because they didn't sound great, but they were usable. It's too bad we didn't keep them because I kind of regret I have, but at least we transcribed them and we didn't throw them away or something,
Yeah.
Next up, we have we have a letter by Jeff Fredrickson. He was the chief engineer behind designing the Bally Professional Arcade, and this letter is dated August 20th, 1979. It seems that the letter accompanied by some hardware, and it simply says, the enclosed assemblies replace the 75361 clock driver located in the oscillator shield. The failure of the 75361 is that the 6-volt high time after warm-up drops below 55 nanoseconds, causing the data chip to appear defective. If you do not have the syncing clock syndrome, replacement is not necessary. I hope you find the enclosed hardware description useful, which I had no idea what he was talking about. So back on January 24th, 2017, I posted to the Yahoo group in message number 15,116. I said, what is this talking about, basically? And I don't know if you remember, but some people commented back and forth. And Ken Lill pointed out that what this actually turned out to be is there was a hardware upgrade that someone named Barry Ellison came up with called the Kludge board. And that's basically what this is, like, apparently. So you can actually have your unit look like the data chip, which is the chip that goes bad, or people think goes bad on the Bally all the time from overheating. But if your board has this problem, it's not the data chip at all. It's some other chip that's driving it or something. I don't really understand it, but I think it's worth noting because it seems like, according to Ken, they actually built this fix into later versions of the Astrocade. So, yeah, pretty neat. So they at least did fix a problem with the system.
Yeah, it was interesting that Jeff and Bob were in contact.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see. Yeah, I was very disappointed when I was going through the Arcadian collection. There was a folder, and it was just labeled Jeff Fredrickson. And so Bob used to do that for many of the people that he corresponded with that he had a whole bunch of mail from. So when I first was going through and scanning the documents, I was like, oh, wow, there's going to be a ton of stuff in this folder. There was one sheet of paper, and it was this.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, well, I don't think it really needed its own folder, but, that just shows the value that he saw in him.
Yeah.
At least he sort of, put him aside, hoping to get more at least. The last one that I noted that you didn't mention anything about is a letter from Jeff Grothaus, or Grothaus, I guess. Yeah. It's dated August 31st, 1979. And Jeff is building his own cassette tape interface from the schematics on page 20 of the Arcadian and page 4 of the Bally Hackers Manual. This would be a 300 baud interface, by the way. He has run into a few difficulties, and he's hoping to get some help. He also wonders if Bob knows if anyone else has created a working interface from the schematics. There's a handwritten note from Bob where he simply writes, nope, or no, really. I just found this letter interesting because why is he bothering to build an interface? Is it to save money? Because at the time they were maybe they weren't easily available. I always presume they were, but maybe they were hard to find where he lived, so that's why he was doing it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, but definitely it's neat that there was a way for you to do it if you had the knowledge to do it. So next up is the last letter, and that's Karen's. So why don't you go ahead and put that one.
All right, so this letter is from Karen Nelson, and that's dated September 10th, 1979. So Karen is a computer programmer, and she got a system from JSNA very early on, and of course had to die from overheating, because everyone did. And
Man.
Yeah. And she was actually a student of Tom DeFonte. So, of course, Tom DeFonte was the person who created the Zgrass language, and he was a professor at the University of Illinois at Chicago. And there's a little bit of detail here about how he used the system in his class. So he had the school order 8 Bally arcades to help teach the basics of computers and programming. So thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, Karen also mentioned that she went to a graphics equipment expo, and she met Ricky, I'm not sure how you pronounce this, Spice or Spice there.
Yeah, he developed the football cartridge and some other cartridges.
So yeah, I think it also, Clowns also.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Karen talked about something that Ricky had set up at the show, so let me see if I'm describing this correctly, but it sounded like a setup where you would display the code on one monitor and the graphics on another one.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, but, that's not really something you could do with a standard system, so he must have had it modified somehow.
Well, I want to read kind of what she wrote. She wrote, in addition, his Bally was connected to a black and white monitor and a keyboard. His commands appeared in the black and white monitor, and the graphics were displayed on the color monitor. However, the whole setup was attached with the Bally board mounted in a frame, not in the case, which leads Curran to believe that some special wiring is needed. Oh, yeah, very much so.
Yeah, so do you think this was using the Seagrass expansion?
I don't know. I mean, there's too little to go on, I would say, from that.
Just couldn't really tell.
Yeah. I don't think she thought so, but it could have been. It could have been. I mean, Tom DeFonte was directly involved in all that. I mean, he co-wrote, I guess, Grass, which is what Z-Grass is based on, the Z80 version of Grass.
Yeah.
Curran also had recently seen the pinball cartridge demoed at the graphics seminar. She says that it looks pretty good, and she'd heard one of the Dave Nutting guys say that he had just sent the thing off to Bally and that it should be out on the market pretty soon. Curran says that there was also a demo of Z-Grass, so maybe that wasn't Z-Grass then, but that she didn't get to see it. She does note that as a student of DeFonte, she learned how to program in Grass, Z-Grass's daddy, she calls it, using a PDP-1145.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. And the last thing she says here that I have is that she's glad to find that there are other Bally people out there who think that the Bally arcade computer has a lot more potential than most people give it credit for. She hopes that Bob Fabris might be able to pass on some information to whoever the marketing manager at Bally is. She would like to see them advertise in Byte and Personal Computing magazines. She would like to see Bally stress that most people buy home computers for games and that Bally has terrific controls, and I agree with that, and that by the time people become interested in programming, Bally will have add-on modules available. She also says that the graphics capabilities of the Bally have no competition. They are the best, and the arcade is dirt cheap when compared to other systems, which is true. If the system had been reliable, I think it would have done, been more fondly remembered.
Yeah.
So that covers all the letters that I have, and I think you don't have any more coverage for the letters either, do you?
No, I think that's everything I've got.
Well, I guess that about brings us to the end of another show. Thanks for listening so far. We'd love to hear any feedback that you may have for us. Whether you used your Bally home library computer as sold by JS&A in January of '78, or maybe you picked up the Bally Professional Arcade sold by Bally through 1980, or maybe you were a user of the Bally Astrocade as re-released by Astrocade Inc. in 1981. Could it be that you were a die-hard Atari or Coleco fan back in the 80s, or possibly you weren't even born yet? Perchance you bought a used system recently, or you have only experienced the Astrocade via emulation using the MAME emulator. Hey, that's better than nothing, right? That you may even never have heard of the Astrocade at all. No matter what the reason, you've got to send us a note. We'd love to hear it. If you have a story related to the Astrocade, then send it along to us. We can be reached at a few different places, although I prefer email. Not everyone likes that. I like it best probably because, you can really express your thoughts that way. My email address is ballyalley@hotmail.com. I can also be reached in the Atari Age forums. My username is Bally Alley. Finally, for all you Bally Arcade Astrocade needs, visit my website at ballyalley.com. As always, we'll be ending the show with a short song that was created on the Astrocade. This is a version of Rockin' Robin. This was originally recorded by Bobby Day in 1958. It was transcribed for the Bally Arcade by Peggy Gladden and was included on the Astrobugs Club Tape number 2. This tape also included the Happy Days theme song, which Peggy also transcribed for Astro Basic. That song was used for the end of show music for the Bally Alley Astrocast number 3. The original song is about 3 minutes or something like that. This one is much shorter. It's only about a minute long. Thanks for listening to the show. Enjoy! Gravatar is basically impossible to play, in my opinion. And I think it's considered one of the tougher games out there, and it is. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with that game, but
I don't remember playing that one.
Before my time. Just kidding.